Good morning and welcome to the December 13th public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I will turn it over to Mark Silverman, our General Counsel, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. I saw her here, but Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
All right, good morning, and again, welcome to our public hearing and public meeting of December 13th, 2022. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel, so you may participate through the meeting. If you would like to testify on any items, you may join the Zoom meeting at the estimated time that is shown on our agenda, which can be found on our website. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so by going to our YouTube channel. And we're going to begin this morning with a public meeting agenda item from the Research Department, which is a proposed historic district, which we've had a public hearing on, and we will be discussing and voting on today. Then we will next move to the public meeting agenda for applications for work on designated properties, which are applications that have, again, already had a public hearing and are back today with more information. And finally, we'll move to our public hearing agenda for new applications for work on designated properties. And with that, I will turn it over to Caitlin Musmickel, our Director of Research, to kick us off.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Item number 1 this morning is LP 2664, the proposed Melrose Parkside Historic District, with boundaries described in the agenda and in this presentation. And before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little background. Commissioners, this is a block where we've focused for several years and have worked closely with property owners. Staff has studied it carefully within the larger neighborhood south of Prospect Lefferts Gardens and determined it stands out with clear boundaries and merits designation as a particularly intact and architecturally distinctive area. After initial conversations with property owners who requested the evaluation back before the pandemic, we had a virtual owner meeting in 2021 to talk about our study and what it means to be designated. And this fall, we had a follow-up owner meeting to talk more about working with LPC. In our ongoing conversations and in testimony, we've heard from some people who are concerned about regulation and also from people who are very supportive of designation, including some lifelong residents. The Block Association is active here, and the community's excellent stewardship of these buildings contributes to its special character and its strong sense of place. And with that, I'll introduce Marianne Percival to make the presentation. Thank you.
Next slide, please. The proposed Melrose Historic District is a remarkably cohesive and intact group of 38 single and two-family duplex row houses designed by two of Brooklyn's most prolific architects, Benjamin Driesler and Axel S. Hedman, for the developers William A. Brown and Eli H. Bishop and Son, and built between 1909 and 1915. At the public hearing on October 18, the commission heard from 13 people in support of the proposed historic district, including Assemblymember Brian Cunningham, representatives of the Historic Districts Council, New York Landmarks Conservancy, Chester Court Block Association, Lefferts Manor Association, as well as 8 individuals. And 1 person spoke in opposition. We also received 14 emails in support of designation, 1 that was undecided, 8 in opposition, and a follow-up letter from a property owner who spoke in opposition at the hearing and included a petition against designation signed by 20 people, 6 of whom had sent emails in opposition already. The proposed district is located on Parkside Avenue between Flatbush and Bedford Avenues in the Flatbush neighborhood of Brooklyn. Of the 38 houses within the proposed district, 20 were constructed as two-family duplexes, a distinctive residential building type that originated in Brooklyn, shown here on the left. The other 18 houses were constructed as single-family row houses. Next, please. The proposed district was identified through surveys and in response to a request from property owners to evaluate it, accompanied by letters of support and a petition signed by property owners. Research department staff reviewed it both on its own and within a broader study of the neighborhood. This in-depth study found that the proposed district stands out within the neighborhood for its highly intact architectural quality and impressive collection of distinctive row houses. We also found that the remainder of the block and adjacent blocks contain buildings of lesser architectural quality and integrity in a variety of scales and ages, which do not contribute to a strong sense of place. Next, please. The name Melrose Park is a reflection of the district's history. In 1883, local physician and real estate speculator Homer L. Bartlett purchased Melrose Hall, an 18th century manor house and estate located between today's Parkside Avenue, indicated here on the map as Robinson Street, and Winthrop Street to the north, for a suburban development he planned to call Melrose Park. The projected development went unrealized, and in 1886, Bartlett sold most of the property to the wealthy brewer and speculator William Brown. Next, please. Already active in real estate development in Brooklyn, Brown's son, William Arthur Alexander Brown, began the transformation of the family's holdings following his father's death in 1905. Around 1908, the long-mapped Robinson Street was opened, and Brown petitioned the city to rename it Parkside Avenue for its connection to Prospect Park and Ocean Parkway. This map shows development on the block by 1912, where you can see the rows of duplexes completed in 1910 and a row of single-family houses to the east, then under construction. The dominant house type within the proposed district is the two-family duplex, an unusual type of row house, apparently unique to Brooklyn and popular between 1905 and 1915. This house type originated in Brooklyn in 1905, developed by the Kings and Westchester Land Company, and was marketed by them as Kinko houses beginning in 1909. Shown on the right are examples of early Kinko houses in the Crown Heights North 3 historic district. They were intended as an alternative to the conventional two-family row houses of the late 19th century, such as those shown on the left in this image from Sunset Park South Historic District, which appears indistinguishable from single-family brownstones. Designed to offer greater privacy, each of the Kinko houses was a true duplex with two totally separate two-story apartments, each with its own private entrance. Envisioning Parkside Avenue as a quote-unquote exclusive neighborhood of elegant duplex homes, William A. Brown began his project in 1909 at the peak of the duplex's popularity. That year, a Brooklyn Eagle article on Brown's new houses called them, quote, the latest type of modern house building, end quote, with, quote, artistic and varied fronts of fine architectural design, end quote. Brown marketed his new duplex houses on Parkside Avenue as, quote, the most perfect houses ever built for two families, and yet with, quote, the privacy of a one-family house, end quote. Drawing upon the classical vocabulary, architect Benjamin Driesler composed 6 distinct designs to create what were noted in a 1909 advertisement as, quote, the most artistic fronts in greater New York with interiors to match. Each house features twin entrances at the first story, facades with or without bowed or angled bays, and mansard roofs punctuated by dormers in a variety of configurations. The prominent bulkheads are original features intended to give the residents of the upper apartments access to the roof. In addition, he designed the standalone property at the corner of Bedford and Parkside Avenues, seen here on the right of the right-hand image, taking advantage of the corner site to vary the design by placing each entrance on a separate facade. As interest in this duplex type declined, Brown in 1912 again turned to Benjamin Driesler to design a row of 8 single-family houses, which he marketed as, quote, easy housekeeping, no basement houses, end quote. With deep open areaways, the rows feature full-width terraces and shorter stoops, and an eclectic combination of classically inspired design elements with Jacobean-style stepped gables. They were the last houses in the proposed district developed by Brown, who that same year announced his retirement from real estate to concentrate on his brewery business. In late 1913, Eli H. Bishop and Son purchased the undeveloped parcel on the north side of Parkside Avenue for the construction of 10 single-family residences. Designed in the neoclassical style by Axel S. Hedman in 1914 and completed in 1915, the American basement plan houses at 357 to 375 Parkside Avenue alternate flat, angled, or bowed fronts with prominent central entrances, flanked by a window and a service entrance. This map shows the historic topology of the row houses with the 2 rows of duplexes by Driesler built in 1909 and 10, shown in orange, and rows of single-family row houses that were built subsequently, shown in yellow. All 38 houses, including the two-family duplexes, remain well preserved. The only notable changes have been to the front yards and a few other minor alterations, such as replacement of doors, windows, and roofing material. The demographics of Parkside Avenue reflect the historical trends of Flatbush through the 20th and into the 21st century. Promoted in early advertisements as an exclusive neighborhood, residents of the row houses and duplexes on Parkside Avenue through 1950 were white and predominantly born in the United States, and included households headed by doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, businessmen, musicians, and artists. Among the block's longtime residents were Ella Bull, an ardent prohibitionist and president of the World's Women Christians Temperance Union, who lived at 377 Parkside Avenue from 1922 until her death in 1952, and Anthony R. Savarese, an Italian-born artist and designer, and his family, who lived there at 292 Parkside Avenue from 1927 to 1980. By the mid-20th century, Flatbush saw a large increase in African-American and Afro-Caribbean residents as Black families moved into the area from other neighborhoods in New York City, such as Central Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant. Central Brooklyn soon became the center of the city's Afro-Caribbean community, and by the 1980s was a major destination for immigrants from Caribbean countries. Today, this vibrant block of Parkside Avenue continues to reflect the diversity of Greater Flatbush. With its distinctive variety of residential buildings, united by classically inspired design elements and uniformly deep front yards and areaways, the proposed Melrose Parkside Historic District has a strong sense of place that distinguishes it within the larger Flatbush area and has remained intact for more than a century. The research department recommends that the commission vote to designate the Melrose Parkside Historic District as a New York City Historic District. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you, Kate. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Kate or Marianne at this point? Right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm starting to send you all requests to unmute so we can have a discussion. All right, and I do want to note that this is a proposed district where we've spent a lot of time. We've worked closely with property owners. We are delighted that we've gotten a lot of strong support from the district, including from people who have lived here for over 40 years. And the stewardship of these properties is very clear, and there's a strong sense of place present on the block. And I want to just sort of state for you, but also for any members of the community who are listening today, that we're going to continue to do outreach in the community. We're going to continue to work collaboratively with property owners. And I do hope that those owners who are still concerned will soon come to recognize the benefits of designation. Yes, Commissioner Gustafson, did you have a comment?
No, I had a question.
Yeah,
We had that, we received that petition that was signed by X number of people. The district isn't that big. What were all of those people individual homeowners? What was what's the percentage of people who were opposed?
I can try to answer. It's a not very small. There's 38 buildings, but 20 of them are duplexes. So some have, 2 units. And in some cases, we have signatures from members of, a family or represent one house. So we are still trying to work through that number. But it is, I think we're finding a balance in terms of support and then what we saw in the petition.
right. And many of the signatures on the petition were already reflected in the testimony that we received. Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, yes, I too hope that those who are concerned will, have their concerns eventually, relieved. If you look at the houses, you can see that they're mostly in very good condition and very well preserved, so that, changes that might have to be made to them should be hopefully rather minor, such as windows and doors, which often really can be approved at staff level and would not occasion any particular problems for the owner. So if there had been a lot of conversion, you might see a lot of changes to these buildings, then perhaps there would be a lot of, more need to bring things to the commission and so on. But they really look like they're quite in very good condition and close to the original in most cases.
They are very intact. Yes, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, well, what is the rear yard condition here? Is there a donut that is going to need to be respected? I mean, is there a similarity between what the current extensions look like? Is it all over the map? Or what's the? Okay, there it is. It looks like there's a remarkable amount of consistency. I don't know, Kate. How do you view this?
There is some have extensions already. And then the lots are slightly different depths, and then what they face also is slightly different. So it's not so much of a consistent, row house donut that we might find, I think, in some of our more typical row house districts. But and then you can see there's some kind of jogs in and around the property lines there as well.
Yeah, the north, I guess it's the north. Yes, the north side. It seems like they're almost identical throughout those 2 groupings.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they do have very deep lots, and they all have slightly different context of non-designated sites and lots surrounding them. So I think, as always with our regulation, I think we try to work very cooperatively with property owners to help them fully realize their goals in a way that is sensitive and doesn't detract from the special architectural characteristics of buildings and districts. And I think, our commitment is that we'll continue to work very collaboratively with property owners and help them make the changes they want to make in an appropriate way. Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, Kate, I'm curious. Speaking of stewardship, are there any original windows remaining in this district? And with regard to roofing materials, assuming they were originally terracotta tile or slate, how many of the buildings retain that original roofing?
I may turn this to Marianne, but I can say briefly that I think we have found a variety. There are a lot of historic windows that are still there, but there are also a lot of replacements. You see a lot of, and I think, predominantly windows have been 1/1, although there's some cases of other configurations. The roof in the Kingo houses, or as they can be referred to, is a lot of, tile, which we have seen some replacements in kind. And it is, which is nice to see because it is a feature that you still experience from the street. So I think,
Yep.
Mary Ann, is there anything I maybe missed?
No, I mean, we do have, as you say, we have a wide variety of windows. And even in some of the houses that are the same pattern, it doesn't look like the windows were uniform as far as the number and types of lights, whether they're casement or these are fine. But
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it looks like some of the houses may still have their original clay tile, but it's hard to tell because some of the roofs have been coated with some kind, there's like, you can see the red tile, but it's been coated with some kind of gray paint or something, probably to seal them. Some of them have been replaced with asphalt. But
So-
overall, I mean, it's remarkable that they have been maintained as well as they have. We have some doors that have got leaded glass transoms. We have original doors in there.
Yeah, and I think, we have a lot of experience helping property owners preserve the historic fabric that they have or providing resources for in-kind replacement. And again, where there is no historic roofing, the staff is able to approve an alternative material as long as it's sort of an improvement and closer to the appearance of the tile than the existing asphalt might be.
Yeah,
And
I just want to be
similarly-
sure that we have something original that we can point to
Yeah,
if we're trying to guide them in a direction that we hope that they might go. So,
yes, I think there is quite a bit of historic fabric left intact, and again, the sort of predominant window type, while you do have some special windows, is 1/1, and we have the ability at staff level to work with owners to replace deteriorated 1/1s also with an alternative material. So we're going to work closely with these owners and hopefully be able to explain all of our processes and our approach, and hopefully their greatest concerns, they'll realize really don't bear out. And again, that they come to see the benefit of this designation. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, and oh yes, Commissioner Shamir Barron, please go ahead.
Just that there was a little bit brief mention, but that the bulkheads are unusual.
Yes.
And do we have any information about that, or and they seem pretty consistent and unaltered, or are they the altered version?
I think they're generally intact, maybe coated, but they, there is a rhythm of them, and I think there is, the way that it relates to the original design and use of these fairly unique house type. But I think the presence of that bulkhead is documented in the designation report.
Right. I asked because, if likely there will be, sort of roof additions, and the question of whether or not this is a distinctive enough feature that won't want to, that will want to remain visible and not
Go away. Yeah.
It's the opposite of how we typically think about bulkheads.
Right.
I mean, I think that they do reflect the typology, the Kinko typology, the 2-family units.
Yeah.
And so I think there is, which is something that we find interesting about these buildings. So I think that will be a point of discussion in the future when we review applications.
I can tell you right now that one of the houses, the bulkhead has been altered. It was a recent purchase, and the new purchaser did some work on it. You can see it's the second one in on the right-hand picture. And you can see it looks like they put in a door and a light. But for the most part, they've barely been touched.
there's a distinctive rhythm, but there's also a roofscape of accretions, which I think is something also that we'll think about as we look at additions on the block. All right, other thoughts or questions? Okay, and you know, should we vote today? This would be the city's 155th historic district. And I believe it's very meritorious, as it's truly a standout block in the Flatbush neighborhood of Brooklyn. It's very identifiable and, you know, very clear with natural boundaries that these buildings are very intact and very distinctive and create a distinct sense of place. They're a distinct collection of early 20th century row houses designed in the neoclassical styles by two well-regarded Brooklyn architects. And these incredibly preserved rows create a strong sense of place, and that continues to reflect the history and the diversity of Flatbush. So I would strongly recommend that we move to a vote today. If there are no objections, Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion and we'll see where we end up with the vote?
Sure. Motion to designate Melrose Parkside Historic District. I move that Landmark Preservation Commission designate the Melrose Parkside Historic District, Borough of Brooklyn, as a New York City Historic District because it contains buildings and other improvements which have a special character and a special historical and aesthetic interest and value, and which represent one or more eras in the history of New York City, and which caused this area, by reason of these factors, to constitute a distinct section of the city. Further, this historic district is part of the development heritage and culture of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP-2664 dated December 13, 2022. I also move that the district be designated with the boundaries as described in the designation report and illustrated in the attached map.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's wonderful. And congratulations to our city's 155th historic district. Thank you all. All right, we'll now move to our Preservation Department public meeting agenda, and I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 23-02398. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 574, Lot 57, 25 West 10th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1846 to 47, and the application is to alter the front and rear facades, install windows and doors, construct a rear yard addition, and excavate the rear yard. This was last presented at the public hearing of November 1st, 2022, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will be presenting the revisions to the proposal, and we'll have the applicants here if there are any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Marina, if you can just unmute yourself, you have control of the presentation. Okay, Karina, I'm going to take the presentation back so that you can unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself now?
Yes, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, yes. Let me give this back to you. Okay, if you can click on your screen, you'll have control.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Karina Bishop, Preservation staff. The application before you is 25 West 10th Street, which is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1846 and located in the Greenwich Village Historic District. The project was first presented at the public hearing of November 1st, 2022,
where no action was taken, and the applicants have returned with an updated proposal in response to the commissioner's comments. Much of the discussion at the public hearing concerned the work at the West 10th Street facade, including the proposal to raise the height of the cornice to increase the ceiling height at the attic level, and the addition of decorative features and door surround at the parlor floor based on a historic drawing. On this slide, you can see the existing elevation on the left, the previous proposal in the center, and the current updated proposal on the right. The applicants have revised the design to omit raising the height of the facade and instead proposed to install a sloped roof set behind the existing cornice. The addition will not be visible from public thoroughfares. Additionally, the previously proposed stained glass transoms, ironwork, door, and surround have been eliminated from the proposal, and instead, the existing non-historic door surround will be replaced with a Greek Revival style door surround and therefore qualifies as staff level restorative work. Here's an existing streetscape with 25 West on the right, and then the proposed condition within the context of the row. Here's a closer existing and proposed elevations. You can see those changes in more detail. And now we're moving to the rear facade. Here are some current photos which show the variety of conditions found within the rear yard on these slides, as well as the neighbors and the rear yard. The attic level at the rear facade will be maintained, and at the addition, at the rear addition, the height of the brick parapet was increased to incorporate more masonry, and a metal spandrel panel between the basement and parlor floor was also increased, all in response to the commissioner's comments. Here's the context within the rear facades of the row and the proposed condition. And then again, the more detailed existing and proposed elevations. The existing building section shows the historic pitched roof. The previously proposed condition shows the raised ceiling height and the flat roof. And then finally here you can see in more detail the maintaining of the existing facade height and the sloped, the raising the ceiling height by sloping at the front and rear behind the cornices. And you can see that in more detail with the dimensions on this slide. And the applicants have also revised the mock-up to depict the sloped roof and confirm there is no visibility over the primary facade. The commissioners will note that the chimney flue extensions will still be minimally visible over the primary facade, and that was the case with the previous design. So that concludes the revisions, and the applicants are here to answer any additional questions.
Okay, if we have questions that we need them to answer. Commissioners, do we have any questions for either Karina or the applicant? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So I do want to just note that we did receive also a letter from the Historic Districts Council with some thoughts on the project, which was shared with the commissioners, prior to today's public meeting. And if there are no other questions, we will move to our discussion. So commissioners, I'm going to send those of you who are muted still request to unmute. So the last time we saw this application, the applicant was proposing to raise the ceiling height at the attic floor by extending the front and rear facades and doing taller windows. And then on the front, they were also proposing windows and doors and a door surround that were recalling a drawing that they had found that had never been actually built. So at that time, the discussion focused a lot on the work on the front facade, and we requested that the applicants not raise the top floor, which they're no longer doing, and instead they're sloping the roof behind the parapet. And at the parlor floor, they're now doing work that is consistent with the Greek Revival style, and they've eliminated the elements that were based on that design, drawing that they had uncovered. And then similarly at the back, they are doing the same approach with sloping the roof, and they've increased and keeping the attic windows at the same height, and they've increased the spandrel at the double height opening at the rear yard addition. So I think that covers the changes, and we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
I think they've done a reasonable job at complying with our requests, and I can approve this, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Devonshire.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I can approve this.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I think they were very responsive. I know the door surround is not even before us anymore, that they
Yeah.
were so responsive that they took it to staff level. The rear facade is typical of what we find today and what's offered to us. They corrected the spandrel problem. The existing massing is now retained because they've found a solution in the nature of that sloped roof. They're most important to me, they retained the unique windows on the front facade. And of course, there's no visibility except for those chimney flues. So I think in every way, they really took our points one by one and responded, and I thank them for that. And I think this is appropriate.
Great, thank you so much. Commissioner Shamir Barron
Yes, I agree, appropriate.
and Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, I agree. They were very responsive to our comments, and I think much improved application. I can find it appropriate.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I agree with everyone's comments, and I think that what they've done is now improve or retain the proportions in the front and improve the proportions in the back of the facade. So I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree, it's appropriate. I do want to call out to staff. I really like the way they showed contextual elevations of the back and of the front. I really thought that was a very helpful thing. Usually, we don't usually get that. And I would certainly encourage the staff to encourage applicants to do it. It really makes the stuff we do a lot easier, because we're always kind of looking at photographs of the backyards and trying to put it together in our heads. And they did it here, and it makes the case very effectively.
Agree, and we do ask for those contextual elevations to really understand it, and it makes a big difference. So we'll continue to press applicants to do that. All right. Okay, so I think we have a consensus. Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion?
Sure. In the matter of 25 West 10th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, an application to alter the front and rear facades, install windows and doors, construct a rear yard addition, and excavate the rear yard, I recommend approval. Finding that the proposed increase in ceiling height at the attic story created by installing a sloped roof set behind the front and rear cornices will not be visible from public thoroughfares and will be in keeping with similar alterations to building of this type, style, and age in this historic district. That the replacement of the commission-approved door surround and infill will not eliminate or damage any significant historic fabric, and that the design details and proportions of the proposed cast stone parlor level door surround and wood infill will be more in keeping with the Greek Revival style of the building and will be based on existing historic door surrounds and infill at adjacent buildings. That the rear facades of the neighboring row houses feature a variety of additions, fenestration, and changing planes. Therefore, the proposed work at the rear yard of the building will not affect a unified row. That the existing rear facade has been modified over time with an addition, painted coating, and modified window openings, and therefore the construction of a new 3-story rear yard addition, which does not project further into the rear yard than the existing rear yard addition, will not disrupt a fully intact historic rear facade or substantially increase the existing massing. That the design and materiality of the rear addition, featuring multi-light casement and awning windows, steel spandrels, and white painted brick cladding, will utilize traditional row house materials and architectural features. That the proposed punch window openings to the top floor of the reconstructed rear facade will align with the neighboring buildings and create a more consistent pattern of openings within the row. That the rooftop bulkhead will not be visible from any public thoroughfares and will be set back from the front and rear facades. The visible chimney extensions will be in keeping with other visible chimneys, both historic and altered, found within the historic district. that the proposed excavation of the rear yard will be set back 5 feet from the property line, allowing for substantial plantings and will not substantially eliminate the presence of the rear yard, and that limited adjustments to grade level at the rear yard will be compatible with the block, which features modest variations in grade level. And that the excavation of the cellar will be done in compliance with DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect this building and adjacent buildings.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 23-02975, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 448, Lot 5, 112 2nd Avenue in the East Village, Lower East Side Historic District. This is a Gothic revival style church building designed by Samuel Burridge Reed and built in 1891 to 92. And the application is to demolish the remaining facade and foundation after the building experienced a fire. This was last presented at the public meeting of November 22nd, 2022, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will be presenting their response to the prior hearing after we open the proceedings.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll do that now. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the proceedings are open and the applicants may speak. And again, as Corey said, this was last heard on November 22nd when we held a public hearing, and we heard the proposal from the applicants. We also heard testimony. We heard many speakers in support of the application to demolish the remaining portions of the facade. And we also heard testimony expressing concerns about that and seeking more information. And also during that public hearing, our own LPC retained engineer also briefed us and had referenced a report that he had previously submitted, which was shared with the commissioners, asking additional questions. And so the applicants today have been reviewing our engineers' questions, and they'll be responding to those in their presentation today. And we, again, will not be taking an action today. This is a day that we will be gathering more information, and we may have more questions after we hear the presentation today as we evaluate the question of appropriateness with respect to the application to demolish this facade. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicants to begin their presentation.
Good morning, commissioners. This is Ken Fisher, Cousin O'Connor, counsel to the church. And thank you for giving us this opportunity, Chair Carroll. If you had the opportunity to look at the response that our construction professionals submitted yesterday in response to your engineering report, you might think that there was a lot of disagreement between the engineers over how to proceed. But if you give me a minute, I'm going to show you why there's actually only a couple of areas, and based on the resolution of just those couple of areas, you'll see that there's actually quite a bit of agreement between the professional teams as to what the course of action needs to be. It's really a question of degree. And when I conclude what I hope will be very brief remarks, Anthony Johnson, who is the architect for the project, will walk you through an updated presentation that includes a number of photographs and other things that were not part of our initial presentation, but which we think reply to your engineer's report. Reverend Lewis will just give a few brief closing remarks. And then we have available for answering questions if you have any. Stephen Lampert, who's the engineer that was engaged by the church for constructability and means and methods issues, and Mark Drozdoff, our OSHA expert. But when I finish, the bulk of the presentation and it'll be short, will be from Anthony Johnson and then Reverend Lewis. So there's really only two things that are fundamental where the engineers don't agree. One is that Mr. Mattson has stated in his report that the buildings department could require the adjacent property owner to provide access for us to bring construction equipment onto the site and for scaffolding and bracing and the like. We are not aware of any such provision in the law. We have not been provided with any citation to a provision in the building code that authorizes the buildings department to do it. If there is one, of course, the church will have to take it under consideration. It may be with another lawyer because I'll get fired for not having known about it, but I'm willing to take that chance. So I want you to, again, unless somebody provides a legal citation that authorizes the buildings department to do that, I'd ask that you please take it as a given that we do not have access from the side of the property, only from the front, and that's assuming that we can overcome the challenges that we're going to describe to you. The other area of disagreement is that Engineer Mattson effectively suggested in his questions or his recommendations that there needed to be a lot of additional investigation, a lot of testing, both visual and invasive, and that would involve a lot of protective installations, additional scaffolding, bracing, and eventually that there would need to be a lot of construction done in order to stabilize the berm that was bulldozed into the front in order to make the wall stable, and that where the foundation really hasn't been engineered. I think that what you'll understand after our presentation is that that all might be true if you were engineering the construction plans for moving forward, but this is an appropriateness application, and that what you'll see is that the amount of material that has to be removed renders what will be left not significant in comparison to what had received the designation to begin with, and that you don't need to do further testing because what we already know is what puts us on the path that led to us being here today. Now, once you get past sort of the concept that there's no access from the side, there's actually a lot of agreement between the engineers, and that's what I want to focus on briefly. The first thing is there's no dispute about whether or not the gable and the two towers are at the risk of just toppling over, right? That's a red herring, and it sort of found its way in, but the test for this application is not whether or not the remnants are capable of standing on their own indefinitely. The test is whether or not it's appropriate to leave them standing there and prevent the church from being able to rebuild. So that's not the issue. There's no dispute that if we are correct that access is only available from the front, that you have to create an opening in the gable in order to bring equipment in. And that's not just our opinion, but it's set forth right at the beginning of your engineer's report on page 3, where he says that, if access is only available from 2nd Avenue, in that case, The entry door is too small to drive significant equipment through, and the front wall would need to be opened enough to allow for the entry of this equipment. And that's exactly what our position is. But where that takes you is to the recognition that if you're proceeding on that basis of taking out a large section of the gable, and we're going to show you what that looks like, by definition, you are removing the limestone facing of that portion of the gable without regard to whether it's in good condition or not, right? That's sort of, I think, a fundamental insight, because you don't need to do further inspection, whether it's visual or invasive or anything else, to know that there is a big section of the gable that has to go. And there's also the opening that has to be done for egress. He suggested there might be a way to waive the life and safety requirements of the building code that would apply. We know of no such section. We've taken that as a given. And then there's some visible damage around where the dormers were on the front. It's clearly not as bad as it was on the back. And we're not suggesting, and I want to make this clear, we're not suggesting that the limestone facade in the front is completely compromised. What we are saying is that we are blocked from being able to move forward unless we can open up a portion of the gable. And by definition, that means removing limestone that might otherwise be intact. And then the last point that I want to make is that in order to do that, all of the engineers agree that the safety of the workers on the site has to be given paramount importance. I think that where Mr. Mattson was coming from was that if you had access from the side, there were a variety of ways that you could provide that protection. And this isn't about whether they have merit or not. Some of them were interesting, and some of them, required further development. But you don't have to get to that point because we don't have the access from the side. And so what we're going to show you is that the only way to do a safe sequencing of the demolition to allow the gable to be opened up, unfortunately, requires removing the limestone that's compromised in the back because it's overhead, removing all of the gable because the arches and structural elements are compromised, and that it has to be done in a particular order so that you don't have dangerous material overhead at any point in time in the demolition process. So that's why what you'll see is that when you go down this logical path, based on what everyone agrees on, that the extent to which the gable and towers need to be demolished will leave only segments of what had been there that bear no relationship to the design, the architecture that was called out in the designation report. So the last thing I want to do is ask you that when you evaluate what you're about to see from our architect, I'd ask you to please keep in mind the testimony of former Commission Chair Bob Tierney at the public hearing on the 22nd. And I just want to paraphrase a few of the things that he said, because I think that they speak to the heart of our application. So he noted, of course, that there are applications to seek, to remove original material in different contexts that require careful consideration, but not consideration of the preservation of it to the exclusion of everything else. That context matters, and demolition applications have certainly been granted in less dire circumstances. And that's because what the landmarks law seeks to do is to preserve the features that contribute to our celebration of the past, not the preservation of building materials only because they're original. And he goes on to note that basically the building, the sanctuary that housed the immigrant experience is gone, the stained glass windows and all of the other features. But what the totality of the damage means is that that insisting that what would be left remain in place or be reinstalled would only result in an inappropriate recreation, and in the meantime would leave an indefinite scar on the block of this lively historic district. The landmarks law, he noted, does not require the exhaustion of every possibility, regardless of difficulty, safety, risk, delay, or cost. And therefore, to allow for the church to rebuild and contribute to the vitality of the district, to have the opportunity to prepare a design for, to do so, the appropriate step for you to take at this time is to grant the application. So I'll be available, of course, to answer questions at the conclusion of our presentation. And now Anthony Johnson will take over. If you can put our presentation deck up, please.
Good morning, Anthony Johnson, the architect for the church. So after our last presentation, we went back and we looked through all the documentation. We found additional photographs and other documentation. We've supplemented our presentation. We'd like to walk you through it. We will show that there are numerous large, loose, broken stones high overhead, which create an unsafe situation. We'll show that there is no access to the site to allow equipment in to make the site safe. We'll show that there is no way to remove overhead dangers without the equipment. And we'll show, even if it's doable, at the end of the day, you'll be left with basically a ruin of what was there. What's that?
Turn the camera on.
Where is that?
Bottom left. Actually, leave it off. Just keep going. Mark, we'll put it on there. Keep going.
Okay. Oops. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, so here we have 3 slides. On the left, you see the church facade before the fire. The middle slide shows the minimum amount of materials that were either destroyed in the fire or will be required to be removed to allow for egress and site access of equipment. In addition, there are some orange marks up on the top, which indicate where it was suggested possibly needle beams could be inserted into the tower to provide protection for the workers who would be in a confined space inside the tower. On the right, you see the minimum amount of materials that would, at the end of the day, be removed for the previous reasons, and in addition to provide a safe environment. So removing all of the unsafe overhead conditions, and this is what you are left with on the right. So we'll start at the north tower. This is the north spire. These are some new photos that we got, and it shows, you can see that from the bottom of the spire, the finial bases, the rusticated stones, all the banding, the dormer surrounds. And this goes up well above the dormer, and it goes around the sides of the spire as well. So these are a lot of fractured, unattached pieces of stone overhead, obvious danger. You don't know when a piece might come loose or which piece will come loose, but they're obviously all there, and they're all precarious and dangerously overhead. Working our way down the tower, down the spire. So on the left, we have a photo that was taken before the waterproofing was applied. With waterproofing applied below the flashing line on the tower. So we call that the interior brick. And then above that, we're referring to it as the exterior brick. And you can see that there's a lot of spalling brick, cracked brick, missing brick, damaged mortar, On the right, you see a large section of spalling brick, very deep. And then we have taken a sample here in the middle. It's about 50 square feet, which is taken from this portion on the tower there. And we've looked at it more carefully to try to quantify the damage that has happened to the masonry behind the facade. So here we've gone and we were able to get a high quality image of the brick on the back of the North Tower, and we enlarged it. And you can see we counted how many bricks there were, how many bricks had no visible surface damage. Doesn't mean that they're not damaged. It just means from the photo you can't tell. So we've highlighted those in yellow, and all the other bricks are either spalling, deeply spalling, cracked, chipped, or otherwise compromised. So that's the North Tower, and we're going to take that and extrapolate that to all of the exterior brick on site. And this image represents about 15% of the north face exterior brick. And then around the corner on the north side of the North Tower, we found some additional photographs. On the left, it's right after the fire when they had demolition equipment on site. And it shows the north face at that time. On the far right, you see what there is now. And so they've come along and covered it with a cementitious coating to protect it. But in the meantime, what that does is it hides the actual structural condition of the wall. And you can see there are a number of cracks, vertical cracks going through the many courses. So we weren't able, the photograph isn't of a high enough quality. We couldn't do that all the way up. We could just see down low. But certainly it suggests that there's damage that is possibly significant and is currently hidden from view. So that's concerning. Similarly, on the South Tower, the South Spire, you have a not quite as bad, but still a lot of broken limestone. We looked at in our previous presentation, the finials are cracked and spalling, loose pieces hanging. The other finial is tipping over at the top. The dormer windows, again, are cracked and spalling. And a lot of the stone at the bottom and the rusticated stone around the dormers, and in this case, going around to the north side as well, are all damaged and overhead. Working our way down on the South Tower, again, on the far left, you see the full tower before the waterproofing was installed. Again, on the interior, brick was waterproofed. And above that is still visible, and we were able to get a better shot of that and take a look at that. So again, we took about a 50 square foot sample from the top of the tower, and you can again see spalling brick, missing mortar, as well as on the far right. And again, this is potentially a serious condition. You have a crack at the steel transfer beam, which is right here, which has been covered over by paint. So again, it's another situation that we're not able to further investigate, but causes concern. And here's the enlargement of the brick on the South Tower. So similar numbers, we counted the visibly undamaged brick, and we come up with 90%. It's a smaller tower. This image is about 25% of all of the South Tower exterior brick. And then we go to the gable. So the gable, you can see on the left is the photo before it was painted with waterproof material. And you can see at the top, you can see the pockets where the trusses used to sit. There were the ridge truss here, and then there were two side trusses attached, one to the back of the facade and the other to the tower. And working down from the top, so this is the coping stone, And this represents the full length of the coping stone on both sides of the gable. And you can see that the coping stone has been undermined. Doesn't appear, there must be something under there, but you certainly can't see anything between the brick and the coping stone. So that's a concern, obviously. Working down at the sill, again, right above the door, this is the sill stone, large dimensional stone fractured. Again, the stone not attached, just held there by friction or gravity. And then down below in the masonry, right at the top of the peak of the arch at the entry door, there are two cracks that are there. One is sort of a diagonal crack going along from the side end of the sill. And then there's another one coming straight down from the sill to the peak of the arch. So again, something that's been covered over. And then we have some images of the east wall. So the east wall of the sanctuary, this was right behind the altar here. So this initially survived the fire. I think the fire was fiercest and hottest towards 2nd Avenue. So this end of the sanctuary was a little bit farther away from that. And here, even here, you can see the extent of the spalling, right? Everywhere where it's a lighter color red, that's where the surface has deteriorated and popped off, and you're looking at the inner brick. So this is how much damage there was here. And again, we don't have a good enough image to count brick or anything, but certainly it shows that it was very damaged. And this was ordered taken down by the building department based on the structural stability of it. So it's gone. And on the right, you see what's there now, just some temporary protection. So then on the back of the facade, it's similar to our earlier slide showing the front. So the left is before the fire, or I'm sorry, just after the fire. The middle slide shows opening up the facade for construction equipment to come in. And then on the far right, you see with the gable removed to allow safe access to the site, as well as the spires coming out. By the time you're taking the bottom portions of both spires, all the limestone out, wrapping around the corners, you're really undermining the structural integrity of the spires. And Stephen Lampart can discuss that a little bit further down. But those will have to come out. That's all loose stone. And we're showing the exterior masonry, the brick here, as white. That will have to all be replaced and come down. It's by the time you open it up and start replacing the brick. And this goes back to when we renovated the church about 10 years ago. We redid the masonry on the church house on 7th Street. Thornton Tomasetti was the engineer at the time. And they said that they viewed the existing brick as an only fair condition. They said the mortar was weak throughout. They noted that there was very little mortar between withes of brick, and they directed all of the brick on the building, interior and exterior, to be repointed, cut down to 1.5 inches thickness. So that's much more than you would typically see. And what that means is when you start replacing the brick for spalling, when you start repointing, what will happen is they open up the wall and they'll start taking the loose brick out, and they'll keep going until they find solid brick. And it could very well be that most of the brick that's up there is not solid and is not stable. So it'll have to come down. And what you want to do is, because you're trying to avoid overhead obstacles, you start at the top, right? So that the taller spire will come down first. And then when you get to the top of the gable, you work your way down, and similarly the south spire. So that's the safe sequence to remove the overhead materials. And then here's an image where we've removed the black, and we're just showing what's left. So on the left, you have the gable gone, the two spires gone. We show the needle beams where they would be. It's about 65% of the original material of the facade is gone. And likewise, on the backside, it's about 60%. And those are minimums. It'll probably, you won't really know what the percentage is until the workers get there and start taking it apart. And then it will unravel to some degree that we can't necessarily predict. And then we did the calculations for the material loss. So this is the backside with the brick. We're showing 90% of all the exterior brick needing to be removed. We did not calculate for the interior brick. We know it's damaged in various areas, but we don't have a good enough photograph that we can actually go in and take an accurate sample. And then similarly on the limestone facade, we did the same thing. So when you remove the gable and the two spires, you're removing 72% of the original material. And then just a reminder, one of our guiding principles, right, is to remove or eliminate the unsafe conditions. So removing overhead dangerous materials is the first order of business. And then this diagram sort of highlights the dilemma of the site when we try to think of how you will attack it and how you will remove the unsafe elements, how you'll bring equipment in, and it's circular. What you want to do is bring construction equipment onto the site to help, so you can use that to provide shoring, to take the loose materials off, to do inspections, testing, and all of that. So you need to bring the construction equipment on site. In order to do that, you need to remove the gable. Removing the gable requires additional temporary bracing. The temporary bracing that's in place now was sort of a static exercise. It was for the facade as it was, protecting against wind and its own weight. It was just lateral bracing. It did not take into account removing materials, removing whole sections of the facade, and doing other invasive testing. So you would certainly need additional bracing, which the equipment will help you install. And in order to get the equipment in, you need to widen the opening to allow the equipment on site. So it's a chicken and an egg. We just keep going in circles. You need the opening, but you can't have the opening without equipment. You can't bring the equipment in because you don't have the opening. So this is the reality of working on the site, and it's something that we can't overcome. And then also it was suggested that in the Madsen report that demolition might be more dangerous than working on the facade and taking it down or otherwise. So this diagram shows how to get it done. You would have a person in a bucket lift. They would use hand tools. They would start at the top. They would use hand tools, working down. All of the orange, pink color is hand demolition. You would start at the North Tower, work down, and then you would work across, always taking down the highest obstacles as you go. The worker in the lift never has an unsafe condition overhead. So it's really very safe, and it can all be done from 2nd Avenue. You don't need access into the site to accomplish this. And then, so in conclusion, there are things we know. We know there are a lot of dangerous conditions overhead. We know even without going inside the towers, a confined space without overhead protection. We know that even without seeing clearly the brick underneath the waterproof coatings on the back of the facade, and on the side of the towers. We know that we lack site access, which would enable us to remove the overhead dangers. And we know even if it was feasible, large amounts of the facade would need to come down, the gable, the spires, parts of the towers, and what would remain bears no relationship to what was designated originally. And I feel it's not appropriate to force the church to demolish and then recreate the old facade. So so let me turn it over to Jackie.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, commissioners. I'm not an engineer, I'm a pastor, but I've been saying as I listen to these presentations that whereas the facade didn't fall down, it actually did burn up. Some have asked why other congregations which suffered fires were able to rebuild with portions of what was left, and why can't we? It's because we can't. We always considered being designated as a landmark district an honor. In fact, I testified on behalf of that years ago. And we were so relieved, friends, when the facade was still standing after the fire. It would look like a sign of hope. And we expected to make the facade a part of our new church design. That's why we went to the trouble of waterproofing it, only to come to realize that the facade was a burden and a barrier. And frankly, with no access to the neighboring site where the fire started, it's not just it's not a workable barrier. It's actually a project prohibitive barrier. Our members, our board, the entire collegiate church community, and I are all committed to building a church on that site, a new church on that historic site that honors our past, that contributes to the district, and that provides a spiritual home for our neighborhood and our church for the future. You know that our ministry takes on the big things. We work on dignity and justice and equality. We've trained thousands upon thousands of people to also build a just society. And we've stood up for the people who are in need over time and now. And in this moment, we're in need. Our church building is destroyed. It's traumatizing. And our facade is broken. And it stands exactly where it can't be if we're to move forward. So we're asking you to honor our intention and to please grant our application so we can move forward and get back to church. Thanks.
We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you for, I think, a very clear and well laid out presentation and set of comments. I do want to note for the record that we did receive a letter from Councilmember Rivera in support of the church's application, and really commenting on her support of the church and the importance of the church Middle Collegiate remaining in this community and as a part of this community and its importance to the community, and also very concerned about the health and safety of the neighborhood as well, and concerned about the condition of the facade. So commissioners, that will be shared with all of you as well. So I'm going to kick it off with one question, which is really not a question, but a request. And then we'll see if the commissioners have other questions. And then, as I said today, we'll really be absorbing information, and we will reconvene in January after having thought through all of the information that we've heard. But our engineer did ask that you provide a copy of the Brick Institute of America Technical Bulletin number 46, which you referenced on page 5 of the supplemental statement that you recently submitted. So if you can send that over to us, that would be great. Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. I have two questions, actually. One, what exactly is the type and amount of equipment that needs to be located on the inside of that wall to do the supplemental support work? What kind of equipment?
I'll ask Stephen Lampert, who's our engineer, to respond to that. But again, we whatever the equipment is, all of the engineers agree that it can only be brought in the front if we have no access from the side, and that you're going to need some kind of equipment. And we haven't fully engineered it, but I think that Stephen can give you some general.
That's not my question. I need to know what kind of equipment it is. How large is it? What's the nature of the equipment?
Morning. You would at minimum be looking at some type of bulldozer equipment and or payloader to level out the site to give a level ground for a continuing inspection from either boom truck or at that point, once you have level ground, a perimeter scaffold on the interior of the building to conduct further investigations. However, I do want to point out that that would be after a phase of removal to ensure the safety of anybody operating that equipment or performing those inspections on the site.
Mm-hmm. My other question, there was something mentioned about a Thornton Tomasetti report that said something like nearly 100% of the brick masonry needed to be repointed. What actions were taken after that report was received?
Hi. So that was during the renovation of the church house and the social hall. And 100% of the interior brick in those structures was repointed to 1.5 inches. All of the exterior brick that was reachable. So there's on the far east end of the site, there's a little bit of courtyard there that we had access to. So that was all repointed. And along the south, going as far as the social hall was all, we had access to those walls on the exterior. So everything that was available was repointed as such.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, other questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. Commissioner Jefferson, if you haven't yet, can you just unmute? Or accept the request to unmute?
Okay, here's my question. The issue that you mentioned was workers' safety. And that's important to me. And the issue I have is scaffolding, netting, all the technical approaches we have not adequate enough for worker safety. I've seen it in Mexico City in cathedrals and 300 years cathedral buildings. Would that work here?
I'll ask Stephen to respond to that.
Very good question, Commissioner. Thank you. It's not that traditional means of protection wouldn't work. It's the problem of installing traditional traditional protection methods is the problem because of the current state of the structure. You cannot enter the site without removal of the gable. So that would be step one. Step two, once that gable is removed, we still have a tremendous infeasible task of trying to secure a site and ensure no overhead material would harm any worker installing said protection you're mentioning. It is not you cannot accomplish installing the protection until the overhead structure has been removed and secured.
Don't you have to install the scaffolding first and the netting? And I mean, isn't that part of the whole situation of to protect the existing fabric first before and then the human beings come on? I'm a bit confused by the methodology and the sequence. So, but that's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead and elaborate on that.
The very structure you're asking to be installed is installed by human beings. with no overhead protection until that structure is installed. Therefore, the only way to ensure worker safety is to remove the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Holford Smith, please go ahead.
So you're saying that you can't get scaffolding inside the church footprint without more heavy equipment, and in order to remove what you're considering as dangerous material, you would use a boom truck from the street to do that? Is that what you're proposing?
Correct. For the removal of any type of material, it would be from a boom truck using a man lift. As Anthony's photo slides showed, the main point of entry has serious cracking at the gable, and that is the only entry into the site. And that harkens me back to my dealings on Norfolk Street, where we had the same exact situation of a very, very disturbing structural crack in a lintel, and it was the only point of accessing the site for the work we were doing at that time. Anthony, please.
Hi, it's Anthony again. So the boom lift can work from Second Avenue and would work for anything on Second Avenue, but it can't reach to the backside of the facade. So you would have to get the boom truck into the site, which cannot happen until the site is prepared, until you have level ground, stable ground. The rubble has to be cleared. So if you could achieve all of those steps, then yes, you could bring a boom truck in, but we can't get to that point without taking the facade down. Does that help?
And you're not able to hoist equipment with a boom truck over the adjacent property in the corner?
Correct.
They won't let you even go over their property.
No.
And that is something the DOB can't require, you're saying as well?
No, the DOB cannot force the neighbor to allow us to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, Commission, oops.
Sorry, I'll lower my hand and I keep raising it.
Okay, other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions right now. So as I said today, we won't take an action. This was a very helpful presentation, and I think the answers to the questions were very, very helpful. And if you could submit that technical bulletin, we'll look at that and see if we have additional questions, and then we will reconvene for a more further in-depth conversation, discussion, and maybe a vote. Okay, so we will thank you for your presentation today, and we'll move on to the next item. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start today's Preservation Department public hearing agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 23-02930. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 15, Lot 7501, 17 Battery Place, the Whitehall Building individual landmark. This is a neo-Renaissance style office building designed by Henry J. Hardenberg and built in 1902 to 04, with an addition designed by Clinton and Russell and built in 1908 to 10. The application is to replace entrance and fill.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. And Brian, if you will just click on your screen, you will have control of the presentation. And Andrew, please state your name for the record and you may begin. Okay, Brian or Andrew, which one of you is presenting today?
Good morning, it's Andrew. I'll be presenting, and Brian will be, and sorry about that. I just took a second to get my computer to work there. Yeah, so I'll be presenting this morning, and Brian's going to be assisting me in just going through the slides at the same time. So If it's okay with the committee, I'll begin. And first of all, I want to say thank you very much for having us on this morning. So today we have 4 requests for 17 Battery Place, which is the building in Lower Manhattan that basically faces the harbor. And the 4 requests have today, we show right here on the aerial perspective of 17 Battery, is 3 locations. We would like to change out the existing doors that are on the building. And 2 of them are on the front face of the building, which would be the south side. 1 location will be on the east side of the building. And on the front of the building, it's a request by ownership to put a railing in front of the front vestibule of the building, and it's right over top of the, they have some vegetation right there. So I'm gonna go through this presentation and show you the 3 different entry locations first, and then we'll go into the railing at the front of the building. So Brian, yep, first of all, we just give a little bit of history of the building. It was built back in 1902 to 1904. And it's a Renaissance revival. It was landmarked back in 2000. And of course, there was 2 parts of this building. First, you have the front building, and then you have the northern building, which was the extension of the building, which was completed back in 1910 after that. Okay, next slide. So on this photograph here, we're just showing some historical photographs that we're able to find of the front of the building. And what we're going to be talking about first is the southeast corner is the first item we're talking about. So we have a photograph from 1903 when the building was originally completed, 1907 and 1911. And at 1911, you can see the northern building was completed at that time behind that building. So here again is another historical photograph from 1904. And we've been attempting to find a clearer picture of what the original facade looked like back in 1904. So far, this is the best photograph we could find, and you can see we've blown it up, and you have the 3 bays right there on the right-hand side. The middle bay is the bay that we're talking about today, and redoing what the entry is currently today. We want to change that out. Okay, next slide. So this is a photograph we found around 2000. When the building was apparently landmarked, and you'll see by the 3 red rectangles on the far left is what we're talking about for the railing, and the next over is a door that goes downstairs to the lower level. We're looking at currently just a hollow metal door. We're currently looking at taking that out and putting in a new glass door there, and then this is the front entry right in 2000. The other thing we're proposing to do, because you will see on the right hand picture there, the guardrails and handrails, we're also talking about taking those out and replacing them with what was just recently done on the front facade, so that all the railings are going to match across the facade here. Right now, we basically have 3 different styles of railings going on, and we like to make it all look the same. So on the upper slide here, this is what kind of a current photograph of, or the best one we could find, of the building facade. You can see where the green awnings are. They're gone now, but you see the doors in the middle, and they're bifold electronic doors currently, or what's there. And they're more like a windscreen, because there used to be this cafe there that's no longer there. And the cafe had these doors, as you approach them, they automatically opened and closed. So we're just trying to give you some relevance. We don't really have any photos of today. My apologies, but they're doing facade renovation on the building right now, local law 11 work. So there's currently a scaffolding around the building. So you'll see that in some upcoming slides. Okay, next slide, please. So here's a floor plan of the ground floor of 17 Battery. And on the right-hand side is the facade of the front facade of the building. And the lower circle we bubbled there, that's where the planters are and the guardrail that we want to put in. Going north of that is you see a larger bubble, which is the 3 bays of windows, the center door that we want to take out, and then the lower door that we want to replace too. Going to the back of the building, or the north side of the building, which is the east side too, you see right there, we have a double set of sliding doors there that we want to replace those two, but I'll go forward. When I go forward, I'll explain each one to you. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the lower door in the front facade. And currently you can see in the right-hand picture, it's just a hollow metal door there. We want to take that out, and on number 4 there, you're going to see that we want to put in a glass door with a transom up above. This is to try to bring some light into the basement area. The design here, which I'll show later, is replicating what was done on the front entry and front lobby of the building, which was recently approved. I'm guessing about 3 years ago, and we'll show you some slides of that later. But we're just matching what was done to the front facade on the main entrance to the building. Here is, again, as I said, there's scaffolding around the building right now, so I apologize about the pictures. But here you can see the lower level door on the left and the upper doors on the right. And so these are the doors that we want to replace and change up the entries. Okay, next slide. Again, this is a demolition showing the doors we want to take out. So there's 2 sets of doors currently, and you're going to see the bifold doors up front, and then you're going to see in the second set of doors behind that. We're taking out that whole thing, and we're going to replace it with a new set of doors. But what we're planning on doing is the doors are going to be set in by about 5 feet off the facade. Now, the glass transom that's up above there of the yellow you see right there, that's an existing glass transom. We're going to keep that glass transom and the surround that's around it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Again, this is just highlighting the glass transom that's there currently. And the yellow is the doors that we're planning on taking out. Okay, next slide. So here is an elevation of what we're planning on doing. And actually, I'll start with the plan, my apologies. So the plan on the left-hand side, we put in a new set of doors, but you can see they're set back from the facade by 5 feet, which is kind of replicating what they did on the main entry. It's not, the new doors are not right on the facade, they're actually set back. And then you have the glass transom, which we'll keep, but what we're going to do is match the color of the new facade of the main building, and we're going to do it in a dark anodized bronze, is what's going to happen there. And you can also see the new railings coming down the facade. We're going to take out the old ones, put in the new ones, which again are going to match what the most recent installation was done. Okay, next, Brian, thanks. So this is a combination of the facade. So the main entrance, which was approved back in 2021, was for the new lobby that 17 Battery put in. And you can see in the background here, the glass facade, the new revolving door with 2 side doors on it as well. And new handrails were put in at that time too. So that's what was done before. On the right-hand side, we're kind of mimicking that again with a glass door that's going to be set back off the facade. On to the next slide, please, Brian. And here is the upper picture is what's existing, but the green awnings are gone now. That's one thing that's different. And you can see even in the upper picture, the original facade in the background was all stainless steel in the center of the building. Now you go down to the lower level proposed issue, you see the new facade installed, and then here's what we're planning on doing by setting a door back and in. Okay, next facade picture. And this was the 2021 presentation of the new facade. As I said, we're just mimicking what had been done previously. And the picture to the right it's installed as is today. Okay, next one. This is a section through the storefront. And So we kept the transom up above, and it's actually, as I said, the door is going to be set back in by about 5 feet off of the facade, is the intent. Now, on the right-hand picture, which is the proposed work, we also are requesting from the commission to add a granite block to match the granite steps that are there. As you can see, as you come up the steps, the last step is extended, and this is just a kind of a code issue where the steps should all match going up and down. And we have this one odd step at the top there. I'm just trying to fix something so people don't stumble as they come out of the building by misreading the steps. And here is where we'd add that step in, and again we'd match the existing granite as best as possible. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is looking back at the east side of the building. Just recently, and actually it's not completed yet, but I've been lucky to see it. They've 17 Battery has redone the public plaza with a new layout, which has turned out very nice. And in doing that, they want to also remove these existing sliding door that's there and add 2 swinging doors, and which you see on the right. And the 2 swinging doors again are to replicate the main entrance of the building as well. Okay, next slide. So here's the elevation of removal. On the yellow is the removal of the sliding glass doors, and on the right is where we're proposing the 2 new doors, and they'll be done in the dark anodized bronze as well. Next slide. Here's some existing photographs. Now this is prior to the plaza being completed. So this is what it looked like before they did the renovation of the plaza. Next slide. And here is the 2 existing doors, a close-up of them. And so the window up above and the transom we will keep. It's just anything below that we would like to renovate and put in something that'll look a little nicer. So next and last request that we have is the planters. So currently, this is a passageway for people to walk back and forth, and we're trying to put something in there that doesn't allow people to walk into the planters. So it's been requested that we could install a glass railing so it's not visible to the front facade, and hopefully it just kind of goes away. So this is what was there prior. Moving on to the next picture. And here's a elevation of the glass railing. So it's just a simple glass railing with an anodized top cap to it, a rounded cap. Simple as that. It's not very complicated, I would say. But it's hopefully something that is there to help prevent people from walking to planters, but also something that's not too visible on the facade, so that it kind of keeps a clean image there. Next image. Okay, and what we've added here is just some of the details of the glass door here, so you can see that it's like a long pole, and it's not just a strictly glass door. There's actually a frame around the whole door, as well as the jamb itself. Okay. And these are some sections, vertical sections of what the glass doors that, and these are just details that we took off of the previous installation that was done on the main facade. Okay, next image. And that would be our presentation today. So I turn it over to you and any questions you may have for these four areas and 4 requests we have.
Okay, thank you very much. And we do have some questions. Commissioner Shamir Barron, please go ahead.
So as far as I understand, the original building did not have a planter area. And when was that installed, and or why?
So on the history of that, I believe at one point it was actually a water. Let me jump back. I'm sorry. You're 100% correct. If we go back to the original pictures of the building, it actually was, I believe, a staircase entry at one time. And it was the main entrance to the building. But at some time throughout history, it was changed over into a waterfall. I think it was at one point, if I'm not mistaken. And then again, it was then the waterfall was taken out, and instead they put in a planter in that location. And it used to be a main entrance right through. So you have the three arches there. And yes, at one point it was just a center entry. And sometime it was broken off to the two sides. And probably that was done during when they made it into a commercial and residential building. Because on the left, you have the residential entry. On the right, you have the commercial entry. And the center was taken out, made into a waterfall. I take it, I wasn't around during that time period, but I'm sure the waterfalls in New York City are tough to run all year long. So I think that was removed and a planter was put in instead.
Thanks. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And as always, we will start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to anyone else whose hand is raised. And with that, I will turn it over to Sonia Gior, our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs.
Thank you. So we do not have any signups in advance for this item, and I do not see any hands raised presently, so I'll note that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends denial.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Thompson, would you like to speak to the community board presentation and the discussion as you understood it and respond to it?
Yeah, sure, I'll be happy to. We went through them twice, and one of the clarifications they asked us to do after our first presentation with them is to find additional images. And so we did a deeper research to try to find more images. We did find quite a few, but nothing that really showed that front eastern entry there better than what we're showing to you right now. And so that was really kind of they're asking is that, hey, you know, can we see something more historical along the lines? And so the image we were showing is kind of the best one we had at the time.
Okay. All right. Any other final thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we move to our discussion?
No, beyond just thank you very much for your time as always.
Okay, thanks. All right, commissioners, if we don't have any final questions, we can go ahead and unmute ourselves and move to a discussion. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And I want to thank the applicant for laying out the areas of work so clearly. So we have the replacement of the glass rail at the planter and or installation of the glass rail at the planter, the enlarging the opening at the basement entry to install new entry doors and to install and modifying the step at the adjacent entry and installing new entry doors there. Both of those doors would have finish and framing similar to the infill that was previously approved at the three main arched openings. And then the change on the plaza side as well. So we'll begin our discussion with, we've got the sort of three doors. On the plaza side, it's removing the slider doors and doing new doors. So 3 new doors and the installation of glass railings, glass and metal railings. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Okay. I guess that in general, I think that what's being done is in keeping with what we previously approved here. Railing looks a little bit different than the previously approved railings. I was trying to see exactly what it looks like on the other side of the building. That, in other words, there isn't, I think there's not a drawing of the that shows the entire facade. It shows the center and this side, but not the other side in context. But I'd like to hear from other commissioners, but I think that most of what's being proposed is in keeping with what was previously approved. So I could support it.
Okay, thank you. And while we have our discussion, I don't know if there is a sort of a 3/4 view that maybe would show the two sides. The side facade is set back on a plaza, so there may not be. Okay, this at least shows the Battery Place facade. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
I think I'm okay with this as presented. This building, it's funny, the work that's being proposed is very much in line with the earlier lobby project, which I guess is good. But neither of them really take a particularly restorative approach, which is unfortunate. The building's a real glorious building. Luckily, it's robust enough to take a less than ideal restoration. But I think given the current status of the building, I think that this is appropriate as drawn.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, I agree with that. And the statement about the robustness of the building. I'm just hoping that someday someone will actually take a restorative approach to this thing, which would be absolutely the most appropriate thing to do. But I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes, I can approve these 4 requests. Appropriate.
Yep,
Okay, great. Go ahead, Commissioner Gustafson.
I think they're appropriate too.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I do as well, not the most appropriate, but I think approvable.
Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think it's appropriate. It'd be nice if this building owner could establish a master plan for the windows going forward. That would help them as well as us. And perhaps be able to bring the building closer to its original historic appearance.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. So I think, while I think it would be very desirable to have a restorative approach here, given the context on this building at the base with the prior approvals and the modern infill and the level of architectural character and robustness of this building, I think we have a consensus to find this appropriate as presented. So Commissioner Chapin, would you read the motion?
Sure. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 23-02930, 17 Battery Place, the Whitehall Building individual landmark, a neo-Renaissance style building designed by Henry J. Hardenborough and built in 1902-4, with an addition designed by Clinton and Russell and built in 1908 to 1910. Application is to replace entrance infill. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features. The proposed entrance infill will be installed at similar planes to the existing entrance infill and will be set back from the masonry facade, thereby helping it to remain a subordinate presence. That the profiles, details, and configurations of the entrance infill, featuring paired metal and glass doors and mullions, including some with transoms and or sidelights, will be consistent with configurations of traditional entrance infill and compatible with the commission-approved infill of this building, while clearly reading as a contemporary installation. That the dark bronze anodized finish of the new infill and bronze, metal, and glass railing will be in keeping with existing and historic metal finishes at this building. That the proposed glass panel of the new railing will provide fall protection and will be partially screened by existing plantings and will not detract from the significant features of the facade. that the enlargement of the masonry opening to incorporate a transom window at the inset basement level entrance at the south facade will be in keeping with other entrance configurations throughout the building. That the proposed granite step at the eastern entrance at the south facade will match the existing granite steps in terms of materials and finish, and will extend the landing to meet accessibility code requirements at the new inset entrance. And that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of this individual land.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move
Thank
to
you
the
very
next
much.
item. Thank you.
Next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-11159, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 587, Lot 53, 43 Barrow Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a federal-style row house built in 1828. The application is to construct a rooftop addition, alter the facade, and excavate the cellar.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. John, you now have control of the presentation. If you can just click on your screen. Perfect. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is John Gordon from Sook Design Group. We're the architect for the project. With me is Bill Sook from Sook Design Group. And we'll get started. So presenting 43 Barrow, this is a photograph of the existing condition of the front facade of the building. It's on the south side of Barrow Street. Just go to location map, Greenwich Village Historic District. As mentioned, it's located over here. And a blown up map from the Sanborn shows that this block is affected by 7th Avenue South, which is here, which cuts the block off and other blocks in the neighborhood. And then this is a aerial, so a satellite photo looking downtown at 7th Avenue South. The subject property is here with the blue over it. It's a part of a row of houses here on Barrow Street. And this is a sort of a block map showing these houses have very small lots. They're less than 40 feet deep, and there's not really a traditional donut in a sense. The lots and the yards are very tiny. This is Barrow Street and 7th Avenue South. The house is right here. Go to the next view. So presenting the historic tax photo from 1940s. This is the house here. There's a shorter house next door at 41 Barrow. And the other parts of the row you can see down the way are very similar in character at that point in time. Go to the next slide. So going back to the front elevation, you can see, as it mentions in the designation report, that these were built in the federal period. The Flemish bond pattern brick ends about here, and this was an extension with a running bond pattern, and then the cornices were added. So it's there's a transition to the facade, and the other houses in the row, as you can see in this photo, had similar things take place. And in the designation report, it mentions the high quality railings on this house, which are being maintained. So we're doing restoration work to the front facade, proposing an addition. So this is the existing facade drawing and the proposed facade drawing. Proposed penthouse setback from the front and railing setback from the front will be part of the application is to change the lintels over the windows to match the neighboring house at 45 Barrow, and over the door. We'll be replacing the windows and restoring the rest of the facade. And then part of the, because of the extension, we're getting into the flues on either side of the house that are being extended. So it's the rear facade elevations. This is the existing condition of the rear facade. Grade is about here, sidewalk level. So this is a little bit below, just for point of reference. And there's a small stair bulkhead existing at the roof. So the modifications to the rear facade, we're going to make a large opening at the garden level and change this opening to a door with balcony and replace the windows. And then as far as the addition, we're putting rooftop equipment in the back corner. We'll get to that in the visibility, trying to keep it as minimally visible as possible, and the parapet being extended with railing at the back terrace. So axonometrics from the front. So you can see the existing stoop on the existing. That's the stair bulkhead I mentioned, the existing flues. There are brick flues up to about 3-4 feet high, and then they have metal flues coming out of them. So we are proposing to, on the because of the extension, the flues have to be raised. So we were just going to extend the metal part of the flue to keep the bulk, minimal. We looked at doing the bulk with the brick, but it looked too large. We think this is a little more minimal approach. So you can see the front terrace and rear terrace here and the equipment in the back. And so we're proposing like a pitched roof over the addition here. And the materials of which we'll get to, is stucco finish around the additional floor. So this is axonometrics from the rear. This is the rear facade here, the stair bulkhead I mentioned. You can see the neighboring houses. And then this is with the addition on, and the rear facade changes. So simple site plan. The lot is only 38'6". The yard is only about 5 feet. It's a very small lot. So we're not proposing any bulk extension in the back because it's so small. So we're just proposing this addition with terraces front and back, as you can see here. And just showing elevations if you're standing on the terraces, the front terrace and the rear terrace, and the equipment will be in this corner. We'll get to that in the visibility, as I mentioned. And you see the extended flues. They need to be 3 feet above the proposed roof. So sightline visibility, this existing addition, it's a pretty narrow street. You're standing across the street. The cornice is here. You can see this is the stair bulkhead and the flues for the front area. And then with the proposal, the proposed addition is not visible directly across the street, but the flues, as we're extending here, we'll get to that in the visibility study. And as far as excavation, we're only excavating within the footprint of the existing building and bringing this down here. So we marked it in blue for the additional areas to the inside of the house. And then moving to visibility. This is the view directly across the street with a mock-up in place. You can see mocked up where additional flue would be extended over the cornice. And so this position is position A, directly across the street. And then this photo is position B, which is at the corner of Barrow and 7th Avenue South. You could see there's visibility here because this house at 41 is shorter. So it becomes a sort of view corridor there. And then the third location is C, which is from 7th Avenue South, being that the block is, cut off as mentioned before. There's a variety of conditions back here. So you can see the house is here with the bulkhead or the mock-up on top there. Move to the next slide. So further visibility locations, again, like I mentioned, this house being shorter, you can see as you come past this edge here, you can start seeing the addition here. That's the mock-up. So that's position D, which is on the map here, position D. Next is position E is here. When you're a little further west on Barrow Street, you can see flues there and a little bit behind the trees here. And then further down the street, position F, you get visibility. Only the flue pipes will be visible here. And that's position F. And then we put the proposed rendering into the photograph of with the mock-up, so you can see what you would see. This is the most visible part from Barrow, but as you go further west, you won't see this part here. You just see the little bit of the flue pipes, and we're taking some inspiration from other locations in the neighborhood have visible flue pipes, so we don't think it's out of place, so to speak. Moving to the view from 7th Avenue South, we're just showing the photograph of what you see of all the different things you see here. What you see is actually the house. And this is the stair bulkhead mentioned. That's the rear facade. The existing boiler flue is this metal pipe here, which we're removing. And this tree is actually in the backyard of 43 Barrow. And these are the flues on the front edge of that we saw in the previous photos, and they serve 41 Barrow. Just for a point of reference. So then I wanted to show these photographs are standing at the roof level, just to give some context. Again, the tree mentioned is here. So this is me standing on the roof, the back of the roof of 43 Barrow here, and you can see in the distance is where we were standing for those photos on 7th Avenue. So this is a photo over the neighboring house at 45, just to point out that the facade there is not in line with 43. It's actually set back, and they have this sort of skylight window system right abutting 43 Barrow. And this is standing on 43 Barrow looking back at those flues, which is that's the other side of this one here. That's the tree. So just some context of what you see on the existing roof this is looking west. So the front flues and the rear flues. You can see some of the other neighboring houses around. So then mentioned the tree. This is the backyard of 43 Barrow. Again, like I said, it's about 5 feet of space. The tree is right here in the back corner. It's a very large tree. And then you can also see this is the facade of 43 Barrow, and there is a gap definitely between the facades of 43 and 45. You can again see here in that window skylight system between the two houses right there. That's part of 45 Barrow though. So this is the rear facade.
Hey, John, Commissioner Shamir has her hand raised up.
Okay, I actually would like to finish the presentation and then do all the questions. So
very good.
If
Thank
you could please just go through the presentation.
Okay, so we took this photo from 7th Avenue and put in the did I skip yeah, sorry, it jumped 2 pages. So this is the photo with the mock-up, and then we put the rendering in so you can get an idea what it would look like, the changes from 7th Avenue South. So that's the equipment with a barrier around it. This is the addition, and these are the extended flues for 41 Barrow. And these are the other flues in the back that I mentioned on those prior shots. And then you just see the context of all the other buildings here. So then just moving to the issue of the window lintels, we were proposing to change the lintels to match 45 Barrow. We're going to match the profile exactly. And actually 47 has a similar setup. So we thought it's appropriate to, continue that language between this house and this house. And then we're proposing the windows to have a 6/6 replacement window. And then just a close-up of comparing those two and the installation detail showing the cast stone lintel we'll be installing. And then just talking about materials, I mentioned the new facade would be stucco, just some of the existing conditions, which is all restoration. And then referencing the existing plans. And then proposed plans marked in blue again, which are the new areas to the house. The other areas, the existing bulk staying, we're just doing interior layout changes, but there's a new subcellar and new penthouse. And then we just close with the final rendering from the front facade and the axonometric rendering showing the front facade and the addition. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron, I know you had a question earlier. You might actually have more questions now after getting through the whole presentation.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm wondering but I sort of think I understand it from the photograph, if there's a plan that shows where that tree is and whether or not they've done any assessment. That tree is remarkable, of the roots with respect to the excavation they're planning on the building.
We had, should I answer now?
Yes, please go ahead.
We had an arborist visit and said the tree is quite healthy, which we're all happy about. The owners want to maintain it and preserve it. So during excavation, obviously we'll be very careful about that. And if there's any roots that happen to make their way inside, we're going to be looking out for that, but we're not aware of any. We did test bits on the interior and didn't see any conditions like that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, thank you. On slide 20, it shows up in a couple of places. The existing side of the stair bulkhead and the neighboring, well, your building over the neighbor's roof has like a silver paint on it. And you're showing in the rendering that it's going to be brick. Are you proposing to remove that?
Yeah.
As well as the chimney? So your rendering shows everything as being brick.
Yeah, this chimney is the 41 Barrow chimney, which we have to extend because of the proximity. And this is that, you've probably seen it hundreds of times, that silver paint that people use as waterproofing. I don't think it's a good idea to put it on brick because it can trap water and can degrade the brick faster. So we don't want to use the silver. We'd like to remove it as much as we can.
So you're planning on removing it from your facade, because on the next page it all shows as being same brick to match.
Yeah, so we'd like to remove it. So this would be removals and removals, but this is new here. So above the line where the additional part is going, we'd like to match the original and keep exposed brick. I think it's healthier for the building to have exposed brick.
Plus, we think it just looks better.
Yeah,
That's
looks a lot better.
And you believe you can match the brick, the color and texture and size that's underneath that silver paint?
Yeah, I believe we can.
They're pretty close. Yep.
Okay. Other questions? All right. I had a two-part question. What is the highest point above the roof at the ridge line of the addition? And then the second part is, the ridge line is something that ends up being visible, particularly obliquely over the shorter building next to you, over the side of from Barrow Street. And so did you consider doing a flat roof, which might, particularly in that view, sort of bring it down behind the dormer and also may lower the chimneys blues?
You mean this point here, right?
Yeah. If you did a flat roof.
We had proposed a flat roof in our initial studies, but it was taller. But if we made this, this is pretty much as low as we can make it to have any reasonable head height in the space. So
so what is the height to the interior height to the ridge line? Floor to ceiling?
I believe it's 8 feet. I think we have it on the section. I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, I'm trying to find the section. Yeah, I believe we have 8 feet to here, but I'd have to check. Well, actually, hold on.
Zoom in on that dimension.
Sorry, I tried to zoom and it scrolled instead.
It's 9'6".
9'6". So the lower portions are maybe like 8 feet.
Yeah, I think actually, yeah. So this line for the gutter line, it's going to be 8 feet. That's about 1.5 feet to that line. That's 9'6". Yep.
So if you did a flat roof, it could be at an 8-foot level.
Inside. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Just a question on the parapet, the rear parapet. You have extended the parapet up, correct?
Yes.
And you kept it in line with the rear facade.
Yes.
Is there any reason why you didn't shift it back so that the original volume would be exposed in the rear? Because it seems to be part of the character of this particular structure.
Yeah, this line, this dash blue line shows the existing roof. There's actually no parapet. It just comes down and there's actually a gutter here existing. And so we were adding the parapet on top of the existing facade in line with it, yes. But we could do a detail where it's set in to differentiate and make it, like a masonry detail to accentuate that. I'm not against that. I think that would look nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yeah, sorry. And had you studied, and was this mentioned already, whether the flue enclosure and the whole flue system can be sort of integrated with the actual bulkhead piece? I mean, why is it, or does it align in plan with wherever you need for that to be?
Yeah, these flues are on 41 Barrow, so that's outside of our property. So
No, I mean on yours.
yeah, on ours. Let me go to, I think the site plan would be best to show that. This one. So the flues are coming up right now here and here. So we were actually able to eliminate one of each of them. The existings, there's 3 existing. We're only extending 2 here, and 4 existing back here. We're extending 3 of them. So we're able to eliminate some, but you're asking if we can integrate them with this.
Sorry, I think I'm asking about this enclosed piece that one sees from or sees in the drawings anyway, in the rear.
Oh, this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the equipment.
Right.
And we just put an acoustic barrier around it to mitigate noise so it doesn't bother the neighbors.
Do we know what those elements look like? I mean, are they as tall as what you've described in the form of the enclosure?
Yeah, we made them, they're just about 8 feet high with the equipment sitting up off the roof plus the barrier around them. It's going to be about 8 feet high. It pretty much matches the gutter line of the new addition here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that equipment could not have been sort of integrated in the actual, in there, yeah.
It has to be outside, but.
I mean, outside as well, but in the domain of that whole new roof element. So you might have.
Inside this
volume. Yeah, in other words, notched into, just so it's not an additional piece of something on the roof. That's what I'm asking about.
It conceivably it could. It's a very small space. So if we had to incorporate that equipment into that addition, then there wouldn't really be much living space left. A lot of times we put this equipment on top of the actual rooftop additions, but the other thing is we're trying to minimize any visibility from 7th Avenue as well. So I mean, if we can try to reduce the height of the fence or the equipment and try to minimize that a bit more, we'll try our best to do that for sure.
Okay, thanks.
But you have a stair as well as the room in there. So if you have the stair and the mechanical equipment, the room.
Jump to the plan.
Yeah, there wouldn't be much space left.
So here's the plan. That's the staircase on this side, doors to go to the 2 terraces, and then that's the equipment here. So, I mean, it would basically take up all the space here if we were to notch that out.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I'd like to just ask if you could move the addition back further. I realize you're concerned about the view from the avenue, but the views from Barrow Street could be perceived as more intrusive. So if you don't worry so much about the views from the back or side, so to speak, actually, could you move the addition back and maybe even put the equipment further forward if need be, to give more space for the addition?
The challenge here has been, ideally we like to have that staircase come all the way up from the bottom and be continuous all the way to the top. You can see that we already set it back a few feet after we built the mock-up to minimize visibility from the Barrow Street side. You see where John is pointing on that, see where that rectangle with the poche in it. We actually pulled the penthouse addition to the rear, and we're just covering the front portion of that just to give ourselves enough room for head height for the stair. So it's
So you pushed it
that's
back.
about the farthest we can move it back and still have the stair kind of align with the rooftop addition, which is what we'd prefer.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions right now, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And again, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and get to everyone else. And I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Great, thank you. So we do have a number of speakers signed up, and our first speaker will be Anna Markham from Village Preservation. And Anna, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am speaking on behalf of Village Preservation today. Village Preservation commends the applicant for the sensitive rehabilitation of the facade and reinstallation of historically appropriate windows. However, like Community Board 2, we have numerous concerns about this proposal. The proposed rooftop addition and chimney extensions are visually obtrusive and disrupt the architectural integrity of this entire block of historic row houses. Additionally, the aggressive excavation at the cellar level is deeply concerning, and we fear will result in damage to this and other properties, as we've seen happen too often of late to properties of similar age and configuration in our neighborhoods. We urge the applicant to rework the design of the rooftop addition and eliminate the excavation portion of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lucy Levine of the Historic Districts Council, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. The proposal for 43 Barrow Street contains a number of elements that are inappropriate and need to be redesigned and properly detailed. The rooftop addition is highly visible from 7th Avenue and therefore needs to be more carefully designed. The exposed gable end of the roof should be contained within a brick Dutch gable and wall with rebuilt brick chimneys incorporated into the form. The bent metal chimney flues and extended chimney flues are all inappropriate. Extending the existing brick chimneys up to clear the roof height and having extra terracotta flue pipes extend 1 or 2 feet over the brick chimney cap would solve the technical problem while resolving the awkward sidewalls. This solution will also create a far more technically viable flashing condition for the roof. The rear facade's corbelled cornice should be maintained, and the rooftop extensions railing should just be steel and set back from the rear facade. The extended parapet conditions shown in the presentation are inappropriate and need to be resolved in another way. We are not able to determine what the current window lintel condition is on the rear facade, and therefore do not know if the proposed elevation detailing is appropriate. We ask the Commission to require this applicant to further study their proposal and seek a more respectful, contextual, and appropriate solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society. And Christina, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
So good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society. The Victorian Society finds most elements of this proposal to be inappropriate. Now, starting at the top, the rooftop addition would be highly visible from several vantage points, including in the context of the street facade. It seems to us a far greater presence than is typically found appropriate. The many chimney flues that need to be raised would give the roofscape all the charm of a petrochemical refinery. The changes are to the rear wall are thankfully limited, but the proposed large opening at the basement level is more like that of a modern storefront than a residential facade. The proposed changes to the front facade present an interesting question of stylistic integrity. Now, each of the simple late federal style houses in this row was changed separately in the later 19th century by adding a floor and some Italianate style elements. Number 43 received a new cornice and Italianate ironwork, but apparently no alteration to the door and window lintels. This was probably when the original multi-light windows would have been changed to the current 1/1 configuration. The tax photos show that all the buildings in this row had either 1/1 or 2/2 windows following the third floor additions. The applicant's proposal would give this building lintels it never had and windows that likely wouldn't have existed after the addition of the third floor. So this is stylistically confusing. We wouldn't necessarily object to the addition of projecting lintels continuing the house's trajectory toward the Italianate, but only if the windows remain 1/1 or possibly 2/2. And only if the lintel additions could be applied without damaging the original brownstone lintels, which appear to be in good condition. The alternate approach, leaving the lintels as is, but changing to 6/6 sash, would be historically incorrect, notwithstanding the fact that other houses in the row have reverted to 6/6 sash. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nancy Pasley, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this application. I live directly across the street from 43 Barrow. And first of all, I want to say that we greatly appreciate the renovation of the facade. This building has suffered sad neglect for the past 50 years. Nothing has been done and it needs repair. However, we must object and object strongly to the rooftop addition, which is highly visible from the street, from both Barrow Street and from 7th Avenue South. And I note that in the mock-up and also some of the pictures, the railing, the parapet railing, was not part of the mock-up. It's a very heavy railing and is, despite the views that the applicant has shown, I think will be additionally very visible. The whole line of the street is uniform at the moment, with the third floor having been raised, and this is going to ruin the symmetry and the whole nature of the street, which as Community Board 2 has noticed, is one of the few unchanged blocks in the historic district. I also want to add that it has not been discussed, but there is a plan for a fire pit in the front corner of the roof. While I don't believe this will be permitted by the zoning code or by the buildings department, I want to point out that this is a wood frame house, as is my house across the street, as are all the houses on both sides of 43 Barrow, despite being having a brick facade. Behind that is 200-year-old wood. A live fire pit is, crazy, and I think indicates the lack of respect that this applicant has for the historic district and for our street. So what I would urge on the commission is to certainly approve the renovation of the facade, but that there should be nothing added on the roof, nothing at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Brooke Schooley. And Brooke, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, thank you. I'm Brooke Schooley, and my husband and I own 45 Barrow, which is right next to 43 Barrow. We share beams and a party wall. And as John noted, an atrium that was installed in our house by a previous owner is attached to the back wall at 43 Barrow by way of an easement. As we discovered in our renovation, these houses are quite interconnected. And we're really happy to see 43 Barrow renovated, and we love the facade proposals. But we are concerned about the extensive excavation proposed and the impact on the neighboring historic houses. We also did minor excavation during our 2006 gut renovation, and we stopped after 18 inches, actually less than that in the back of the house, when our team discovered conditions that made them extremely concerned about compromising our house as well as 43 Barrow. And I would also note that our work was done within 6 inches of our footprint, inside our footprint, and did not entail underpinning the party wall as proposed by the applicant at the CB2 hearing. We're also concerned about flood damage from digging an additional cellar level in an area with such a high water table. And the rooftop addition, I think many have spoken on that. We are concerned about the additional load on the party wall. And like Nancy, we believe a rooftop fire pit would be prohibited by section 307.7 of the fire code, given that these are connected wood framed houses and not in a zone that allows for fire pits. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we do not have any other speakers signed up in advance. And I do not see any other hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval with commendation of the restoration of the facade and installation of proper windows of the period, denial of the rooftop extension and chimney extensions, or any other structure on the roof where any construction would be unacceptably highly visible from the pristine street of small row houses and nearby avenues, denial of the wall-to-wall excavation of the cellar for reasons of concern for the integrity of the building and neighboring buildings, denial of the rooftop fire pit owing to grave concerns over the evident danger of any open flame in an enclave of wooden buildings, and suggest communication with the proper authorities about this aspect of the application. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you would like to respond to the testimony. We've heard comments about all three aspects. I think there were still some questions about the lintels, and then we've heard comments about the rooftop addition and the excavation. So if you can address all three, or if you wish to, please go ahead.
As far as the lintels, yeah, I mean, it was presented that, you know, we're taking the inspiration from 45 Barrow. The proposal is to replace them completely, not just do a surface applique over the existing. I just always feel like if you try to do a surface applique to just replicate the shape, the integrity of it over long term is going to be pretty flimsy. I think it's better to have a solid piece created and installed. And then as far as excavation, it will be underpinning, and it's being done all handwork and underpinning all around. And the pins are kept to, you know, very minimal size as far as width. It's safer to do them in smaller widths as you go down. And you know, if there's some unforeseen condition that presents a really hazard, we will definitely pause and evaluate, and we're going to make sure this is done very carefully, and our engineers are going to be watching every step of the way. We'll guarantee that. As far as the rooftop visibility, I think we've made it clear from the beginning. There's not much. It's going to be visible from this view, of course, from 7th Avenue, to the nature of the block being cut off and all these unusual conditions here. So visibility from 7th Avenue is unavoidable in a sense. And we've done.
I also want to mention, John, you know, the comments from the community board were based on a different presentation or different design of the proposed penthouse, and that it's gone through quite a bit of modifications with staff coming up to this public hearing today.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions?
Do you want to just address the fire pit, John?
I mean, the fire pit, if the clients choose to put one, it's a piece of furniture. It's not a built-in piece, and it's not like a fireplace or something like that. It's one of these contained units. So.
And you'll check on with DOB on the
Yeah, we'll check with DOB on the code, but it's not built in. It's, you know, it's a piece you just put like a chair. So.
Okay, so it may actually not be under our jurisdiction, but you do want to make sure it's safe and meets all.
Yeah, of course.
Building codes.
And we're reworking the structure and improving the fire safety of the building. I mean, we can't do anything about the neighboring houses, but you know, we're gonna make everything fireproof that we build. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm curious, back to the front facade lintels. What evidence do you have that those lintels appeared like the adjacent buildings and were cut back?
We are not suggesting that they were cut back. We're suggesting that we would simply like to change them to match 45 Barrow.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, Commissioners, so I think we'll move to our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And the sort of three components that we're looking at are the lintels on the front facade, a rooftop addition with associated mechanical equipment, including raising the chimneys and the mechanical units at the back, and then the excavation beneath the footprint of the building. So we'll begin that discussion, Commissioner. And I would say, you know, as with any application for excavation under a 19th century building, we do work closely with our own engineer to review the drawings as well. So we would expect that you would work in consultation with our engineer, of course, with the Department of Buildings engineers as well. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you please go ahead?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I think they're asking a lot of this little house, but let's start at the front. I'm not an expert in period between the federal townhouses being converted to more Italianate, but I do see on the block that there are other examples with the 2/2 windows that were suggested in testimony without the more decorative lintel. I think I would like to hear from staff if that was a more appropriate than the 6/6 windows with the projecting lintels. I think.
Yeah. Do you want Corey to address that?
Sure.
The commission has made numerous approvals on this streetscape on this block for the 6/6. So the staff does take that into consideration. But in general, you know, matching the original configuration as it existed at the beginning, and then in later alterations for which we have no photographic evidence, you know, we rely on what we do know of this building, others in the row, and also from others of a similar type in the district. And certainly some were modified and all of their windows were replaced, perhaps with 2/2 or 1/1. In other cases, I think the top floor was extended or added and they just matched what was below. So in this case, we determined that the 6/6 would still be appropriate for a building of this style, understanding it had been later altered as well. And I think we were thinking of the lintels as a kind of a separate matter because those two varied from building to building. But the report does say that this particular building seemed to have originally had the flush stone lintels without the projecting caps.
Okay, I think in that case, I would vote for the flush lintels and not the projecting.
Okay.
The rooftop addition, I think, is too highly visible from all vantage points. I think that if we allow a rooftop addition here, it needs to be set back from the side, from basically from all sides, so it reads like an addition. Right now, with the proposed brick facade facing 7th Avenue, it looks like it was intended to look as if it was always there, and I think that's not appropriate. I think that the rear parapet line, the low parapet, should remain, and that parapet line should continue across the, I guess that's east. So any addition would read as something added to the building. And I think also that the material of brick is inappropriate. Again, I think it should be a stucco or a metal panel. I think it's much too tall. I think if they could bring it down to 8 feet, that would certainly help visibility. But I would like to hear what other people have to say. I'm also concerned about the excavation, given this very, very tight configuration of these townhouses, very old, very small, narrow yards with the large tree in the backyard. I think the excavation will be dangerous for this house.
Okay, thank you.
Those are my
Commissioner,
comments.
great. Commissioner Chapin?
I think that I'm particularly concerned about the visibility over the Barrow Street side. And I think that the addition needs to be set back further. I agree with, Anne, that the material should be something that makes it more obvious that this is an addition. I think that's would be helpful because it is going to be visible from the 7th Avenue side. So from that side, I think, although it looks sort of attractive this way, it does appear to be part of the building. I think that's the wrong way to go. So they need to either use stucco or metal. And I would not have it have a peaked roof. I heard that, the applicant saying that they did clearance for the stairway, but that might be accomplished with some sloping or something if necessary. So, I would like to see it be less visible from the Barrow Street side and have it be a different material and look from this side so that it's obvious it's an addition. I think that's and I also, as Anne is concerned about, I'm concerned that we really make sure that the excavation is feasible in this case without any damage to the adjacent buildings. And I don't know if we ever have our own engineers look at these things.
Yes, we always do. And in fact, our own engineer has
Great.
looked at the drawings that we've received so far and has signed off on this as feeling that it would be as proposed safe. But we did hear testimony about the condition of the building. So I think we want to just make sure that the
Party wall,
engineer
yeah.
has all of that information.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay. Yeah, I agree that the front facade should revert to what was known and that they can work with staff on that for this particular building. In other words, if there was a flat flush header, then that's what should remain. And I'll defer to staff on the mullion design. I think that the rear facade is basically okay, but I do agree that the increase in the parapet height should not occur. You can do it as a railing that's set back a little bit. I would also suggest, in line with what Adi was saying, that air conditioner enclosure is rather visible even from this angle. You can solve it maybe by moving one of the air conditioners over to the other side so that they don't come all the way to the parapet. They're a little shallower. I mean, there might be 8 other different options, but that just occurred to me as a possible one. And in terms of this view here that we're seeing, I agree with everybody that it's too visible. I agree that a flat roof is in order. But what I was thinking is that what was on this building prior and what is obviously on a neighboring building is an angled bulkhead. I think that a variation of that could be done here. If you look at the plan, the stair rises towards the back and you could kind of, layer it down. Oop, you had it there for a minute. You could have like the area over the stair to be lower, and then have the higher part, which I agree should be flat, set back a little bit. If that were what they chose to do, I think it could remain in brick because it is in brick on the neighboring building, and it probably is in brick underneath that silver stuff. But again, I think Anne's idea about going with another material would also be okay. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that my colleagues have said. I agree completely with Anne's statement about the facade, the lintels, and the addition. And I kind of agree with the Victorian Society's discussion about the windows. This sets up a confusing orientation about the Muntins, and I think maybe they want to revisit that with staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with many of the comments from the commissioners, not to confuse the issue any further. And made very many excellent points. So did Michael Goldblum and Diana Chapin. So let's see where the commission wants to go with this one.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with most of Anne's comments. I would add one more about the chimney. I think the chimney is in a different plane from the main building, and I think if they extended the brick, perhaps like we see in these images, that it would be less visible or a different language than what they have there now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree that it is inappropriate in any of the number of ways that commissioners have raised already. The two things I would highlight as my primary concerns are the various aspects of that visibility of the rooftop addition, and number two, an extreme concern about the excavation issue in light of recent events. I think the applicant should be very, very, very concerned about how this work is done.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I agree with all of the comments. They need to revisit the question of height here, of the addition, location of the cooling elements, as Commissioner Goldblum has recommended, and really am concerned about the condition of the tree, even with precautions that are typically focused on stability of the building. Here, there's another issue, and I think they really have to consider it.
Okay. All right. Thank you all, commissioners, for your really thoughtful and clear comments. So I think, it's very clear that there's a consensus that I think a majority that the lintels on the front should be the flush lintels, as we know existed historically, that the parapet at the back, I think there was a majority, should not be raised, but really mostly focusing on the rooftop addition, that it should be less visible. And there were a number of suggestions made in terms of how to do that, both in terms of setting it back from various sides, flattening the roof, managing the intersection between the bulkhead and the addition, and changing the material. And so I think, given that any one of those combinations could result in a different appearance given the visibility of this addition, I think we won't take an action today, and we'll ask the applicants to study those suggestions and think about the combination of those changes that results in the sort of least visible or most recessive installation or construction, and then we'll ask them to bring it back to us with the revised proposal. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll now move to public hearing item number 3, LPC 22-11813, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 828, Lot 33, 1140 Broadway in the Madison Square North Historic District. This is a neoclassical style store and loft building designed by Manneke and Frank and built in 1914 to 15. The application is to alter the entrance, surround, and replace infill and install a marquee.
Hey, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Julie, you now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Wonderful, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Julie Rosen from Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners Preservation Consultants, and I'm joined today by my colleague Cass Stackelberg, Mark Bella from Montroy DeMarco Architecture, and Louis Iglesias from Colliers. 1140 Broadway, as Corey mentioned, is located in the Madison Square North Historic District, right at the northeast corner of Broadway and 26th Street. It was constructed between 1914 and 1916 as a 16-story terracotta-clad store and loft building designed by Meineke and Frank, who designed many buildings in this district, as well as in the nearby Ladies Mile Historic District. The building is currently multi-tenanted with offices on the upper floors and retail spaces at the ground floor, which extend along the long Broadway frontage and turn the corner onto 26th Street. The office floors are accessed through a single entrance, which is tucked away at the northernmost bay on Broadway. And this entrance is the focus of our proposal, which involves removing 1970s era infill and an overcladding system and installing new infill and a canopy to create a more harmonious and visible main entrance for the building. The entrance can be seen more clearly here within the ground floor context in this left photo and within the larger block context at the right. The existing entrance infill with its low swing doors and bulky overcladding is difficult to identify as the main entrance to this large building. Its current condition lacks presence and detracts from the overall reading of the base of the building, particularly in comparison to the more consistent treatment at the ground floor storefronts. And these storefronts were installed around 2010 following an earlier commission level approval. This stretch of Broadway is incredibly busy with pedestrian activity, and there's a constant stream of office workers and their visitors going into and out of the building all day long. With multiple retailers spread across the 106 feet of Broadway frontage, it's particularly important that the main entrance to the office floors be clearly identifiable. The existing overcladding covers the full mechanical mezzanine level, including ducts and vents that are integral to the building's mechanical system. The removal of the existing infill and the redesign of this bay will allow the entrance to become reintegrated within the remainder of the ground floor, and it will be the last step in the rehabilitation of the base of the building, which has been many years in the making. And a view of the existing entrance condition is on the left, and a rendered view of the proposed design is on the right. The proposed design consists of new glass and metal entrance doors and a projecting glass and metal canopy with downlights, with all metal elements finished in a dark anodized bronze color to match the storefront infill. Above the canopy, parts of the building that are currently covered over will be repaired. And within the mezzanine window openings, new louvers will be installed to meet the building's mechanical needs, with decorative grills installed in front in order to create a more finished appearance. An important aspect of developing this proposal was researching how these existing conditions came to be and how the base of the building changed over time. The photos at the far left and center of the page were taken shortly after the building's completion in 1916, and they depict the original ground floor design, which had a symmetrical Broadway elevation. There were two outer bays that contained granite enfranements, and those flanked 3 bays of glassy storefront infill. And just a quick note, we thought it was really interesting that one of the storefront bays actually had a large projecting awning at this time as well. The ground floor appears to have remained largely intact through the 1940s, but the storefronts were later replaced with bulky metal infill and large signage installations that obscured much of the ground floor. And after 1940, the symmetrical ground floor configuration was also eliminated as the entrance bay was reconfigured. And the photo on the left shows the condition of the ground floor in 2009, with the non-historic infill and large signage installations still intact. This is very similar to what the building looked like when it was designated 8 years earlier. But shortly after, our client began a significant undertaking to revive the base of the building. New aluminum storefronts were installed with a design that was contemporary in nature, but also inspired by the historic infill. The scope was approved at a public hearing in 2005, and I did want to note that that approval also included some work at the main entrance, including the installation of a new projecting canopy, but it was never constructed. And so this current proposal for new entrance infill is the last piece to fully bring the ground floor of this building back to life. Looking more closely at the existing entrance conditions, the opening is framed by high granite bases with terracotta cladding above. There are 3 Herculite swing doors that are topped with a glass transom, and those provide access to a deep lobby within. The doors are quite short for a main building entrance. They're only 7 feet tall, and they're deeply set within the masonry opening. The overcladding extends around and above the doors, and it's composed of two parts. There's an aluminum screen structure that projects beyond the plane of the facade, and there are two black granite-clad piers that extend from the threshold to the sill line of the second floor. The overcladding covers the entirety of the mechanical mezzanine of this bay. Vents at the side of the screen structure, which can be seen here, provide ventilation for the intake and exhaust ductwork hidden behind. From our site investigations, we have confirmed that all of the projecting features of the original granite enfraimment were hammered away when the overcladding was installed, and I'll go into more detail about our findings later in the presentation. The concept for the new entrance design is built around rationalizing the various needs of the building into a cohesive design that fits naturally with the other infill. The new design will pick up on many of the facade and commission-approved storefront details, including the simple metal storefront framing and a dark anodized bronze finish, the decorative bulkhead grills, as well as the inset panel designs of the terracotta spandrels throughout the building. And on the top of this slide is an existing Broadway elevation compared with the proposed elevation on the bottom. The entrance bay is highlighted in red. The new entrance design reflects the proportions, details, and finish of adjacent bays, but it also incorporates distinct design elements that will allow this bay to be clearly identified as the main entrance to the building. It's very important for the functionality of this building that the main entrance has an independent character from the southernmost bay, which is a retail entrance. An existing detail elevation on the left is compared with a cutback elevation on the right, which shows what's happening behind the overcladding. And there are several layers of backup structure, and I have photos to show you later, but those backup layers include largely CMU walls and metal bracing that span the entirety of the opening and support the overcladding. Behind these elements, probing has revealed that the projecting granite elements have been hammered away and no longer exist, particularly at the upper portion of the opening. But any intact granite that was found during probing will remain exactly in place where it is. The mezzanine window frame, mechanical ducts, and terracotta spandrel are also visible in this elevation, again, behind the overcladding. And looking at a comparison of the existing and proposed design, in the proposed, the mezzanine level will be revealed, and that will be above a new projecting canopy, cantilevered from the floor slab, and new doors below. In section, again, existing on the left and proposed on the right, there's a lot happening behind the overcladding in this existing section on the left, both in terms of the backup construction and the layers there, as well as in the various floor levels that are hidden behind. Again, the mechanical mezzanine is currently completely hidden from view. And in the proposal, the mezzanine level will be exposed again. And the cantilevered canopy, as I mentioned, will tie back at the mezzanine floor slab level so that there's no impact to the terracotta masonry. Our site investigations were very helpful in determining what existed behind the overcladding. We conducted several rounds of probes at both the lower and upper portions of the overcladding, and we also met on site with staff to look at the results together. And these photos were taken at the mechanical mezzanine level, shown with the red arrows and the key plan at the left. And I'll just take you briefly through all of these photos to explain exactly what's happening here. The top three photos are mostly focused on the variety of structural interventions that currently support the overcladding. That includes CMU walls, metal bracing, and wood blocking. And photo one here is looking north from the mezzanine window level. You can see the backside of the overcladding, two ducts coming out of the mezzanine windows, which exhaust to the exterior of the overcladding. And then there's a large sill cap flashing piece that has been installed over all of the backup masonry. Photo two looks up from the mezzanine window. You can see some metal bracing, that vent in the back of the overcladding. And what's particularly important here is this L-shaped CMU wall, which exists on both the north and south sides of this bay. And they're shown in these darker hatched portions in the key plan here. And these structures are anchored back to the terracotta jambs, and they're actually supporting much of the overcladding structure in conjunction with a CMU wall that spans the width of the bay. In this photo, photo three is looking down from the mezzanine window with the overcladding on the left, CMU wall on the right. And I'll skip down to photo 5 because this is now looking behind the CMU wall. So this is the CMU wall that runs across the bay. It's a 4-inch wide CMU wall structure, a small cavity. And then behind that is all that remains of the granite pediment that was once part of the original enfrainment. Nothing exists up here anymore. Cores were made in the granite. You can see a couple of them here. And the decorative pieces were ripped off, chiseled off, and the CMU wall was built immediately in front of that. There's also a separate granite sill, which is part of the overall mezzanine window frame, and that's what we're seeing the face of right here. Above the mezzanine window, thankfully, we found the existing terracotta spandrel intact, so that will be revealed and repaired as part of this project. And now at the lobby level, probes were also conducted behind the black granite cladding on either side of the entrance doors. We found metal framing, metal mesh, and mortar constructed around the original granite pilasters, but only the shafts remain. All of the decorative projecting elements were cut back here as well. These intact granite elements found through probing will remain in place, and new cladding will be installed over them. I wanted to just take a couple moments to take you through the design proposal in more detail. Again, all of the existing entrance infill and overcladding will be removed. The new infill will be aluminum finished in a dark anodized bronze color. And the overall height of the entrance opening will be maintained in the new design, but the height of the doors themselves will be increased from 7 feet to 9 feet to create a more welcoming and open entrance. A swing door with a side light will be installed at the right side of the opening to provide an accessible and code compliant entrance to the building. And a revolving door will be installed at the left, which will help with energy conservation in the lobby as there is no vestibule. The doors will be metal framed with tall 10-inch kick plates, which mimic the storefront door designs as well. And on either side of the doors, the existing black granite cladding will be replaced with the new metal panels that feature an inset design at the returns. That's on either side of the entry doors here. And the historic granite shafts will remain protected behind this new cladding. The projecting metal and glass canopy will meet the important wayfinding and entrance identification requirements, and it's been simply designed with streamlined proportions. A new metal spandrel panel will be installed above, and this will mark the transition between the lobby and the mezzanine level. And it also features an inset panel design that references the typical terracotta spandrel detailing. The mechanical mezzanine will be exposed and will once again read as an independent floor level. The existing tripartite bronze window frame will be retained and repaired. The openings will also be reused to meet the building's mechanical needs. And therefore, new bronze finished louvers and decorative grills will be installed within. The existing masonry surrounding the window will also be repaired. The existing terracotta spandrel panel is intact, as we saw in the probe photos, and those will be repaired, those units will be repaired as required, as will the existing granite sill. But due to the way that the CMU backup wall structures are attached to the terracotta jambs, we are anticipating that full replacement of those units will be required. And those are just the 6 jamb units on either side of the mezzanine window. Because of this very limited scope, we are proposing to replace the jamb units in cast stone, and that will match the terracotta in profile dimensions, color, and finish. And we've worked closely with staff throughout this process to refine the details of the design proposal, and we will continue to work with them to ensure that we get a very good cast stone match. And to provide historic context for our canopy proposal, we researched how the district looked and functioned in the early 20th century. Many buildings utilized canopies for wayfinding in the busy district, and they were particularly important when there was an underlying symmetry to the facades. The examples most similar to 1140 include the Breslin and Hotel Martha Washington, which both had matching portals at each end of the primary elevations, but utilized canopies to call out which bay was the entrance. And we also looked at recent LPC approvals and found many examples of canopies in the historic district. Many are quite contemporary in nature, often utilizing a combination of metal and glass, either cantilevered or attached with tiebacks. Signage is found on both the marquee facades as well as on the top edge with visible but integrated light fixtures. And the canopy design for 1140 Broadway fits within this realm of other recent approvals. The main canopy structure at 1140 will be clad in metal and finished in the same dark anodized bronze color as the infill. The height of the full canopy assembly is 14 inches. It's very slim, and the supporting structural members cantilevering out from the building will be expressed at the underside of the canopy. Strip light fixtures, which you can see here, will be integrated within the structure to provide downlighting. The top of the canopy will be glazed, as will panels at the underside of the canopy, which will span between the structural members. And this glazing will allow light to continue to reach the sidewalk and to enter the lobby during the day. In elevation, the inset panel designs at the front and sides will provide subtle detail, and they'll create a frame for the raised address lettering, which will be in a light bronze finish for contrast and legibility. Starting to just look briefly at the plans, the lobby is very narrow and deep with a low ceiling height. And because of this, it's very important for us to maintain the amount of glazing at the entry doors to allow as much natural light into the interior as possible. In plan, the entry door setback will be consistent with the existing condition, and this is also consistent with the setback storefront doors along the Broadway frontage. The maintenance of the setback will allow both the swing door and the revolving door to remain fully within the masonry opening so that there are no projections onto the sidewalk. As part of the design, the existing terrazzo threshold will also be replaced with a new granite threshold. And the canopy is shown here in a reflected plan, and just wanted to point out that the 4 primary structural members are clearly articulated here with glazing in between. And an enlarged plan view of the new entrance infill shows the door configuration as well as the inset design that I mentioned earlier at the metal panel returns. We also have a few additional door section details and a detail of the mezzanine window scope. And finally, in this comparative view with existing on the left and proposed on the right, the removal of the overcladding relieves the building of a somewhat distracting and very much incompatible addition. But the proposed design will improve the presence at street level and will create a more visible and compatible main entrance for the building. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Michael, sorry, didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead.
So what is that gray material of the mullion above the canopy?
This right here?
Yeah.
That is the existing granite sill.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions? And then, Julie, did you say that in the prior approval, when we approved the storefronts, at that time, the commission approved a canopy at this building that was along with an entrance that was never installed? Okay. All right, so if there are no other questions at this time, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have several speakers signed up. Our first speaker will be John Gerage, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm hoping that my video is on, but I'm not muted. So in general, I support, my name is John Gerage, and it's my first time on a Zoom meeting with the LPC. So forgive me if I'm not technically as astute as others. I want to say that I sent in some testimony, but basically the building is going to be benefit from this upgrade and semi-restoration, but I would ask that the commissioners require the applicant to restore the pediment, the granite pediment and the pilasters on the side, so that both the South Bay and the North Bay match. It's a very, very simple Chicago school style building. I think it's critical that this granite be restored. And I know the applicant talked about differentiating the entrance. I think by adding a canopy, it's inherently going to be differentiated. I don't think that not reduce or not including the decorative elements back in is detrimental, or I should say I apologize for this, but including the decorative elements back in of the granite is not detrimental to differentiating this lobby entrance. And I would ask that the commissioners require them to do so. I also just want to note very quickly that about 20 years ago, Society for the Architecture of the City and myself submitted a massive report prepared by Tony Robbins on extending this district, which never happened. And I don't mean this as criticism, but just as an encouragement that there's a massive tome of information about possible extensions and individual landmarks in this area that I would encourage the staff to look at. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lucy Levine, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I am speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. I'm happy to say that we applaud this excellent application and find the proposed infill to be an improvement over the existing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christina Conroy, and I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, good morning again, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society. Now, the applicant's proposal for 1140 Broadway includes many changes which the Victorian Society supports. These include the removal of modern elements from the northernmost entrance on Broadway, including the glass and brass doors, the black granite cladding, and metal grills. We are happy to see that they are proposing to restore the historic tripartite bronze-framed window openings above the entrance and the terracotta spandrels. We believe the louvers the applicant is proposing for the restored tripartite windows will not draw undue attention away from the building's historic elements, and the proposed canopy is well scaled and detailed in a simple and obtrusive manner. However, we can't understand why the applicant is ignoring important historic material still in place on this facade and missing the opportunity to restore more of the original features of this entrance. Commissioners, this building has 2 entrances facing Broadway, originally matching. The northern one was altered before designation, but the southern one retains significant historic material. This includes granite-clad colonnettes, spandrel, and a step pediment. The applicant is proposing to use metal with a dark finish for the side panels, flanking the north opening spandrel panel above the canopy. We believe using gray granite for the side panels and a stepped pediment matching the original one still in place at the south entrance set above the new canopy will go far towards restoring the original appearance of this entrance and the building. Please see the figures attached to our written testimony, including a detailed photo of the intact south entrance and annotated drawings showing how the north entrance could easily be brought much closer to its historic condition. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. All right, we do not have any other speakers signed up in advance. Just checking to see if we have any hands raised. And I do not see any hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends denial of the application unless the applicant agrees to remove the proposed canopy from the design of the renovation and to only use the terracotta or cast stone for any masonry replacement. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So maybe I'll begin with the Community Board 5 testimony, just to clarify the resolution. They did state during the meeting that they were rejecting the proposal solely because we were proposing a marquee, and that is something that they never approved, that they never approved marquees. They were otherwise very supportive of the application, including all of the new design elements. And they did ask to clarify that we utilize cast stone for any of the replacement terracotta, and that is what we are proposing as part of this application, just for those limited jam units that will require replacement. In addition, in response to some of the other testimony, I just do want to clarify that the granite has been cut back so significantly, particularly at the pediment area, that there's really not much to restore there. It's really gone. But any of the intact elements that we did find at the sides of the entry doors will remain intact. We're not removing any granite that we found. Everything will remain in place. And we are just proposing to cover it up for potentially a future project. But also just in comparison with the southern bay, these bays, the northernmost and southernmost bays, have been differentiated from each other for so long. And we do feel that what we are proposing is an appropriate contemporary design for this building and for this district that will work well with the context. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I think we don't have questions and we'll get ready to move to our discussion. So if you all can unmute or accept my request to unmute, that would be great. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this proposal to alter the entrance. And the big move is that they're removing all of the modern cladding and material and preserving the historic fabric, revealing the terracotta spandrel underneath, and then proposing new infill, some cladding and the canopy within it. And just as a reminder, the commission previously approved a canopy at this location in the past. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Much improved. I mean, you just have to look at the facade. It's incredibly well done. I have no issue with this. I think it's, as I said, well done.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, if you just toggle back and forth between 23 and 24, and you just look at what's there now and what's in, I mean, it's just a tremendously positive improvement. And I think they handled the revolving doors and the accessibility issue very, very neatly. And I have no problem with the marquee whatsoever. It's subtle and appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yeah, so you mentioned, Chair Carroll, that it's a terracotta spandrel, but actually it's a granite spandrel, right? That remains.
I
get that wrong.
Up above, I believe it's terracotta. Julie, just nod. Yes.
So, no, I'm sorry. So the gray piece is granite.
The gray piece is granite.
Okay, yeah. So probably the what's being proposed for removal will be a feature that we will designate at some point in another project, because it's an interesting design of a modern style. But yes, I agree that firstly that they've done a lot of serious and important investigation to find out what's actually there, and I think that they presented that in a very clear way. I think it would be interesting if they were to have proposed more granite in this location, which is what I'm a little bit unclear about, the extent to which there might have been a symmetrical condition on either side of the building with, exists more granite there. So that would have been an interesting proposal as well. But I do think that the kind of the vestige piece is suggestive, and the canopy is okay. I don't think it's, another solution might have been, I think might have been even more in keeping with the building, but I think it may be appropriate. So I'd like to hear what others say, but I think it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I think this is appropriate. I think they've done a really nice job of keeping the entry very understated. I think the canopy was well scaled and simple. And I think the upper spandrel panel complements everything else that's been done on the storefront here. I would have been nice to see more granite exposed, and so perhaps as they're doing the work, they might discover that there is more that they can expose. But I find that their approach that they've taken to this is appropriate, and I can approve this application.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I think in general, it's a great improvement, and I think that the proposed changes and the canopy are both approvable, so I can support this as presented.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay, thank you. I agree that this is a major improvement. I think that the biggest improvement here is the restoration of the terracotta spandrel at the second floor line, which goes a long way to returning the symmetry to this facade. I think that in line with what Ann said, I would suggest that they work with staff and explore if the panels, the granite panels to the left and right of the entrance below the canopy can be exposed. I think that would be an important thing. So I have trouble with those metal panels being kind of included unless staff deems that the underlying material is just not suitable for being exposed. I also think the letters are a little bit too big, but they could work with staff on that too.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire?
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's comments, and it's approvable.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with the commissioner's comments as well. I would just say I recommend the applicant for a very detailed presentation.
Okay. All right, so I think we have enough to support this application, and we will ask the applicants to, as they are doing the work, to continue to explore the conditions that are revealed at the granite panels and granite on the side, and to figure out how much granite is left, what condition it is, and what the right appropriate approach is for the cladding there. So we'll do an approval with that modification. Commissioner Jefferson, would you be comfortable doing that motion?
If somebody else could do it, because I'm
Sure.
having a cold. And
Of course.
difficulties.
Yeah. Okay, let me do it, since we're going to add this modification. In the matter of 22-11813, 1140 Broadway, in the Madison Square North Historic District, a neoclassical style store and loft building designed by Meineke and Frank and built in 1914 to 15. This is an application to alter the entrance surround and replace infill and install a marquee. And I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Madison Square North Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed infill will be installed at a similar plane to both the existing entrance infill and the historic infill, and will be set back from the primary masonry facade, which is in keeping with the original design. That the profiles, details, and proportions of the infill, featuring a tall revolving door, single door, and side light in dark anodized bronze finish, metal framing, panels, and window grills, will be compatible with the base of the building, while clearly reading as a contemporary installation. That the presence of revolving doors within the storefront infill is consistent with historic and modified storefront infill found at buildings of this type within this historic district. That the north entrance surround and infill was historically similar to the south entrance, but was heavily altered prior to designation, and therefore the proposed work at the north entrance surround and infill will restore this feature closer to its original appearance and will help restore a sense of unity to the building's base. And that the proposed metal and glass marquee will be anchored to the building at the modern storefront infill, will be well scaled to the building, and will be in keeping with the simple designs of modern marquees installed at buildings of a similar age and style found elsewhere within the district. That the address numbers and lighting will be simply designed, well scaled to the framing of the marquee and compatible with the overall design. That the removal of the select terracotta units at the ground floor entrance surround is warranted by their deteriorated condition. That the cast stone replacement units will replicate the historic terracotta units in terms of placement, dimensions, color, profiles, details, texture, and finish. And that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Madison Square North Historic District. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff to explore the condition of the granite and the possibility of exposing more granite at the base, or determining the appropriate approach given what is revealed under that exploration, and that they also study the size of the lettering on the marquee in consultation with the staff. Right, Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second, and thank you, Carol.
Sure, thanks. Okay, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. And please continue to work with the staff on refining those details. And commissioners, we are a little behind schedule, so I think we will break for lunch now, and we will return at 1:25, and we will pick up with 340 West 72nd Street, which is the next item on our public hearing agenda. So we'll ask all members of the public to leave the meeting, exit the meeting now, and rejoin at 1:25. And if you leave voluntarily, that will avoid any technical difficulties should you want to return for the afternoon session. And we'll see everybody at 1:25. Thank you.